I'd like to call to order the regular council meeting for Wednesday, October 1st, 2025. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Corporate Officer, do we have any late items? There's no late items. If I get approval of the agenda, please. Councilor Van Alphen, Councilor Betts, all in favor? That carries. Consent agenda. Can anybody like to remove anything from the consent agenda? No, if I could get a motion to approve the consent agenda. Councilor Van Alphen, Councilor Barkwell, all in favor? That carries. And straight into my mayor's report. Yesterday was the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, which coincides with Orange Shirt Day, for which Deputy Mayor Traynor and Councillor Barkwell joined me on the Walk for the Children from Penticton to the Silks Residential Schools Monument on the Penticton Reserve. The walk serves to honor the children who never returned home and the families that are still affected by the legacy of the residential school system. Last week, from September 22nd to 26th, 5 members of council, myself, Deputy Mayor Traynor, and Councillors Barkwell, Betts, and Peake, attended the Union of BC Municipalities annual convention in Victoria. The UBCM convention provides an important forum for dialogue between local and provincial governments, with intergovernmental workshops, resolution debates, and one-on-one meetings with provincial ministers and ministry staff. We had formal meetings with 6 ministers. Anne Kang, the Minister of Tourism, Arts, Culture and Sport, to speak about our request to apply a municipal and regional district tax or a hotel tax. Brenda Bailey, the Minister of Finance, to discuss support for rural infrastructure to ensure the sustainability of the agricultural land reserve. Randine Neal, the Minister of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship, to discuss the source water protection plan for the Trout Creek watershed that the District of Summerland is developing with the Penticton Indian Band. Jagrup Brar, the Minister of Mining and Critical Materials, to discuss our ongoing concerns with the Garnet Valley gravel pit that was approved last year. Diana Gibson, the Minister of Citizen Services, to talk about the possibility of a pop-up Service BC Centre in Summerland 1 day a week. And Amanda Shaw, the Parliamentary Secretary for Mental Health and Addictions, to discuss youth mental health in the light of some recent local tragedies. We also requested, but were not granted, meetings with the Premier, the Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs, Minister of Agriculture, the Minister of Transportation and Transit, and Minister of Health. However, we did meet with senior staff from those ministries, as well as from BC Assessment and BC Hydro. For the second straight year, the District of Summerland also organized a meeting of UBCM delegates from farming communities, which was attended by more than 50 mayors and councillors from about 20 municipalities. This year, we were joined by the Agricultural Minister, Lana Popham, senior staff from the Ministry of Agriculture, the Chair of the Agricultural Land Commission, and the CEO of the Land Commission. The week prior to the UBCM convention was filled with meetings and community events here in Summerland. On September 20th, I was joined by Deputy Mayor Traynor and Councillors Patton and Peake at the railway station on Bathfield Road for a celebration to mark 30 years of operation of the Heritage Steam Train. Since 1995, the steam train has taken 350,000 riders to the trestle and back. So congratulations to the Kettle Valley Steam Railway Society for creating what I'm told is the single most popular tourist attraction in the Okanagan. As I said to the Society's volunteers and staff that day, we hope they keep chugging for many years to come. On September 19th, Deputy Mayor Traynor and I welcomed Provincial Opposition Leader John Rustad to Summerland. And over a coffee, we discussed several issues with him and Penticton Summerland MLA Amelia Boltby. On September 18th, Councillor Barkwell and I attended the regular board meeting of the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen, where we received an update from Parks Canada on the proposed National Park Reserve in the South Okanagan-Similkameen. Parks Canada is trying to create at least 10 new national parks by 2030 and is working with Indigenous communities to co-develop and co-manage new protected areas. On September 17th, I had the honor of officially opening the 10th annual Riga Arts Festival at the festival launch and opening night reception at the George Riga Arts and Cultural Center. The opening night included a variety show reflecting the festival themes of words, theater, and music as inspired by George Riga. On September 14th, I joined Deputy Mayor Traynor and her family and many other Summerlanders on the Terry Fox Run in support of cancer research. And on September 13th, I had the honor of officially opening the Fall Fair. And then I made my way over to the Endless Summer Show and Shine. Deputy Mayor Traynor and Councillors Bett and Peak, I believe, were also there, and many, maybe some other councillors as well. Didn't see everybody because both events were very busy, very crowded. As our summer winds down, it has been great seeing so many people out and about, thanks to such a diverse calendar of community events that provide something for everyone. Thank you to all the volunteers who make these events possible and contribute to the vibrancy of our town. That's my report. Now I'll ask the CIO for his.
Thank you, Your Worship. It was my privilege to attend the UBCM meetings last week in Victoria along with the corporate officer. The role of staff in supporting these meetings is the preparatory work in arranging the meetings council would like to have with key ministers on priority issues, as well as preparing binders and conducting technical briefings for attending council members. In the meeting itself, staff are called upon to clarify operational details or program specifics. Often letters or follow-up meetings are required to keep the issues moving throughout the year. Other work includes logistics for travel and accommodation and on-site duties like note-taking to produce a record of decisions made. Sometimes we hear criticism about the expense of these meetings and the value of attending. Aside from the tangible benefits where specific commitments have been made right at the table, like the $400,000 food hub grant we received from agriculture a couple of years ago, from my own view, there is an absolutely value in engaging the province in this venue. I speak from my own experience as a former provincial public servant for 20 years in the Alberta government, where I participated in countless meetings on the other side of the table, supporting the minister in the Alberta Equivalent Conference for the same purpose. I worked in 5 different ministries and held 4 different ADM portfolios during my time there. Provincial governments listen carefully to the concerns received in these sessions, whether they are heard at the table directly or reflected in resolutions passed in the sessions. I remember as a provincial staff person anxiously tracking the various resolutions as they work their way through, and then needing to comment to intergovernmental staff about how we should respond. In many, many cases, the issues were heard in these meetings, got the cogs turning. And inside the provincial government, that's important, whether that was to support new programs, augment existing grant programs, or in some cases, introducing significant new policy or legislative changes at the provincial level. These meetings matter, and I appreciate council's commitment to be there for Summerland. Finally, just as a reminder, there is a planned power outage scheduled overnight starting tomorrow, which is October 2, from 10 p.m. to Friday, October 3rd, 6 a.m. This overnight outage is required to safely complete electrical system upgrades as part of the ongoing Wharton Street revitalization project, and approximately 300 electrical connections in the downtown area will be temporarily affected. Check out www.whartonstreet.ca to see if your property is affected.
Okay, thank you. Council, any questions? Either of us? No? Okay, we'll move on to delegations. We have 2 delegations today. First up will be the South Okanagan-Similkameen Wheelchair Society. So just, gentlemen, come on up, and Mr. Richards. If you could just push the button on that microphone. Yeah, that perfect. No, you had it. Sorry. It's on.
Now, right?
No.
It needs to show red.
Yeah, if it shows red. Yeah, okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. It's all yours, sir.
Well, thank you, Rich, for allowing us to speak here. I'm accompanied by Kyle Dirksen, the Vice President. He drove me up here. Okay. We actually got this society formed in February 1st, 2024. Okay. It's getting members signed up is a bit difficult at the moment because there's a lot going on in the world today. But I've had experience with my late wife had MS, and I had her up to within 100 meters of the lookout tower at Apex. Had her on top of Mount Cobo. I had her in a wheelchair, not a wheelchair, a walker. I pushed her up to the top of Giant's Head. She did 90% of the trail from Trout Creek Trestle to the second trestle past Chute Lake. And there are several sections she couldn't do. And she did the whole Myra Canyon trestles in a wheelchair. And I know how impressive it, how much she appreciated it. I managed to get a vehicle with a swing out seat for the loader, and I had a swing out crane in the back for putting the wheelchair in. And after she passed away, I put my plans aside, which were I was trying to get access to lagoons at Vassal Lake. And I had a meeting with the city of Penticton, the regional district, federal and provincial representatives, and they were all for the idea, but wanted me to advance it somehow, which I was unable to do. But I had approval from Clarence Louis, but I had to get permission from the people that control the land down there, whose head office is Ontario, and they did not even reply to my letter. So when my wife passed away, I put my plans on hold until I started meeting a whole bunch of people in wheelchairs. I said, I've got to get back to doing it. And some of the things that we're looking at is possibly getting that trail up to the top of Giant's Head, wheelchair accessible, so we can expand the ways that people in wheelchairs can enjoy our countryside. And I also that the city of Penticton is doing some work on the KVR, and I'd like to see the whole KVR wheelchair accessible, and I'd like to see the all of the dikes in the area wheelchair accessible. And if we can get into some mountain lakes that have good fishing in, we probably can get the fisheries department to put wheelchair accessible docks in. They were, at that time, we were discussing the ones to Vassal Lake, the Vassal Lake lagoons. They would put a wheelchair accessible dock down there. So what I'm here for is to ask for your support, and see if you can push this along a little bit. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'll just turn it over to council now. I'm sure there'll be questions, if you don't mind answering some questions.
Fine.
Council, any questions? Councillor Betts.
Well, thank you for coming here today and speaking with us about your ideas. My name is Councillor Betts. And so is your vision ultimately to see paved pathways all through the wilderness?
Not necessarily paved. The Parks Branch has some plans for a environmentally friendly covering on them, and I'm not too familiar with that. I'm a little bit of a dinosaur. But yeah, I personally like to see, paths that allow the water seepage naturally into the ground and don't heat, try and eliminate the heating. Like a pavement, dark pavement adds to our heating problems. So I'm very environmentally conscious that way. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So there are materials that, other than pavement, that are suitable for wheelchairs I think I've seen those in national parks.
I'm not, like I say, I couldn't understand that when I was trying to get the information on it, and I'm not very tech savvy, so I was having trouble. I know that these mats that they put down there at the Piscataway Beach, for those mobile.
The Moby mats?
Yeah. We do have a problem with them down there. The waves come in and they make them very difficult for handicapped people to walk on, because they all of a sudden dip down because the sand is washed out from underneath them. So I'm hoping to talk to the city into putting maybe a light cement walk down there with rounded edges, and maybe a railing partway into the water, so that they do have support until they get into deep enough water where they can support themselves. I'm looking after a wheelchair, an MS lass now, who nearly drowned down there, and she hadn't been in the water for 14 years before she was able to start to get down there walk, but it's very dangerous for her. Yeah.
Councillor Trainer.
I don't know if you know, but we have a new Moby mat down at Rotary Beach.
Mhm.
And I don't think that we get quite the same wave action that they do at Skaha. So you might want to try ours. It was just put in. So it would be great to get your feedback if you do try it.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say, I think a paved pathway or some kind of wheelchair accessible pathway to the top of Giant's Head is a good idea. I've always thought about that because right now you can drive up to the higher parking lot. But then if you're in a wheelchair, you have difficulty walking and you get up there, you can't get any higher, so you can't get to see the view. So I've always kind of thought that was a bit of an issue. So I think it's something that can be explored for sure. And there's often grants for these kind of projects. So thank you for bringing it to our attention again, because I think it's something that needs to be done at some point.
Thank you. Yeah, so we all have to work together.
Yeah, I think the first step, Mr. Richards, would be for us to first get an idea on how much that would cost and what it would do. And we have budget discussions coming up starting next month. And so that's something that we can discuss in our budget deliberations.
Thank you very much.
Don't see any other questions. So thank you very much, Mr. Richards. And it was a pleasure talking to you on the phone about some of these things as well. So,
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Our next delegation is with BC Nature, and I believe Andrew Banks and Molly Tilden. Are you both online there? Yeah. Okay. So I'll just turn it over to you. You can decide who's speaking first.
Over to you, Molly.
Okay, great. So if I share my screen, will you guys all be able to see it?
Yes, we will.
Okay. All right, so are you all seeing my slideshow here? Yes, okay, great. So thank you, Mayor and Council, for having us. My colleague Andrew and I are presenting on behalf of BC Nature, the Federation of BC Naturalists, and more specifically, the Municipal Protected Areas Program. First off, we just want to acknowledge that BC Nature is based in the Lower Mainland, and our work is held on the Coast Salish territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. Who is BC Nature? Well, as I mentioned, we're a federation of local nature clubs representing more than 56 local nature clubs across the province. We were established over 50 years ago, and the Municipal Protected Areas Program was launched in 2023. So the Municipal Protected Areas Program was established to support Canada's commitment to protecting 30% of lands and waters by 2030, also known as the 30 by 30 commitment, which was made in 2022. So essentially, we work with local governments like the District of Summerland to understand if you already have some lands that would be eligible to be considered a protected area. A lot of the time, this is parkland. And then we would assist the local government to register these lands in something called the Canadian Protected and Conserved Areas Database. And that database is used by the federal government to keep track of their progress towards this goal of 30 by 30. So what is the status of protected land in Canada? As of 2024, 13.8% of terrestrial area and 15.5% of marine area is protected. British Columbia also has a goal of protecting 30% of British Columbia lands by 2030, and currently 19.9% of BC's land base is protected. So why should local governments participate in this initiative? Well, first, the federal government recognizes that there's a lot of underreported land that's municipal land that would qualify for the database, but is not currently registered. You would be helping support a national commitment. It would be validating some of your local government's conservation policies. You would be helping promote global biodiversity goals and climate adaptation. It would also raise the profile of your local government nationally. So, for land to be considered eligible for the database, it needs to have clearly defined geographical boundaries. It needs to be achieving biodiversity goals. Actions that are incompatible with conservation need to be prohibited, and they need to be intended to be protected in perpetuity. So a lot of times parkland qualifies. That being said, some activities such as wheelchair accessible pathways and things like that are still acceptable and would still be eligible for registration, as long as there is some biodiversity protection happening. So BC Nature would conduct an assessment of District of Summerland owned land, and we would then process that information and create a submission for the database. We would also work with local BC Nature clubs to get biodiversity data about your parkland. We did a preliminary assessment of the District of Summerland parks, and Giant's Head Park looks like a good candidate for registration. Here are just some examples of other municipalities and regional districts that have registered their lands in the database as of 2024. So we've had lots of excitement and media releases, and lots of communities are getting excited about this work. And that is all from us. We look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there currently any of the protected areas in Summerland registered in the dividend? Is there anything in Summerland registered?
If I'm thinking back to my preliminary assessment, there are some provincially owned lands that are in your district boundary. I think along the beach, maybe there's a bit of a provincially owned land that has been registered. But I would have to look more in depth at the District of Summerland to
Trail Creek Reserve. Probably the Trail Creek Reserve. Yeah. Okay. We have quite a few already existing. We have Adams Bird Sanctuary. We have the Woodbridge Nature Preserve, Giant's Head Mountain, of course. Then there's that land that's preserved as part of the Hunters Hill development. So there's quite a few already that I think would be pretty easy to register.
Yeah, that would be, yeah, that's kind of the idea is we're looking at what do municipalities already have protected, and then just getting that national recognition, and getting it in that database so that it can be tracked.
And would it cost us anything?
It is free. BC Nature conducts most of the work, keeping like the time commitment on behalf of your local government as minimal as possible. Our funding comes primarily from the federal government.
Yeah, great. Like to hear that. Councillor Trainer?
Would we, by registering our lands, would we qualify for any grants? Like, do you see this federal program, the 30 by 30, offering any kind of incentives in the future for municipalities?
Yes, in the future, there's the goal of having, if you have your land registered in this database, you make extra points in a grant submission from the federal government. It's not in place yet, but there is discussions about making that happen in the future.
Councillor Betts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. When I first read about it, it seems like a pretty easy thing to say yes to. I think it ultimately makes the different levels of government look like they're achieving something when actually, those protections have already been put in place by many local governments. It's just a matter of kind of cataloging what is already done as compared to maybe issuing more. So I guess you got to start somewhere by actually knowing what is already held. My question is, if we were to participate in this program, what is the obligation on the part of the District of Summerland in terms of the land? So for example, Giant's Head Mountain, we've already done some amenity upgrades. There's a brand new bathroom facility on there. We just did a major trails upgrade over the last number of years. So what kind of obligations sit for the municipalities?
So there is no restrictions on the future use of the land as a municipality. The idea is that as you register the land, it says in the database. Now, if things change and something happens and you decided to deregister the land or take it off the database, you're allowed to do that without any restrictions. It's a simple process of basically emailing the federal government. There's a certain website you go to, and you would email them saying you want to deregister the lands. But again, we plan on only registering lands with the municipal's guidance, lands that are going to be protected in perpetuity, so that we avoid situations like that. But there are no restrictions on the land if you register.
May I follow up? And so just second to that, so I understand that. And in terms of spaces where there already have been some improvements made, is that a limiting factor in selecting that land?
No,
So
like
sorry.
we can also, depending on where, like if there's a lot of like a parking lot and bathrooms and things, we can always exclude that from the area that we actually submit into the database. We can always kind of like cut that out and just submit the more natural area. But if it's less than, I believe, 10% of the overall area that we're submitting, then it's fine to be included. And in terms of trails and things, those are really well accepted in terms of protected areas. We understand that it's sort of a balance between recreation and biodiversity protection. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Councillor Peak.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm wondering, do you provide any signage for these properties? Is there any benefit to be listed? Do you do any protection statements about them? Is it advertised in a certain way? What's the benefit to the municipality?
So we don't have any signage that we put up, but what we do it is recognized on the national database. And then earlier this year, with the municipalities and local governments are registered, they all issued media announcements that were picked up by the local press and sometimes the national press. So it is quite a good moment for these municipalities in the promotion of their biodiversity policies and approaches. So it's a recognition more at a level like that. And some of these municipalities also post onto their data onto their websites that they've registered these lands. So there's recognition there as well.
My subsequent question would be, do you do any work in these areas? So if there were invasive plants, is there any volunteer group you send out to do anything? You're just looking at the listing.
Our primary job as Molly and my job is to look at from a desktop from our computers, look at these lands, work with staff to make sure they are biodiverse and are protected, and then to register them. And we do all that at no cost to the local government. In the process, if there's local nature clubs that belong to BC Nature, we try and engage with them. And usually they have databases on the biodiversity. They may have more information than your staff have on these lands. And we try and encourage them to submit that information to us. Let's put it into the package as we submit. And also, through that process, it gets the BC Nature clubs involved and participating in the registration process. But the onus will be on them to maintain or to do any works per se.
Thank you, Andrew.
Councillor Betts.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask another question. Just wondering if your organization helps facilitate any of the kind of communication with BC Nature Clubs. For example, I'm not sure if Summerland has one, but maybe if you're involved with like reaching out to our schools and things. We've got really active outdoor groups. So I'm just kind of curious about that.
Yeah, my apologies. I didn't check to see which local nature club is based in Summerland, but we are pretty involved in the interior. We will work with White Clubs we're involved with. We also work with bigger organizations. Now they're a little bit more further east than you, like the Kootenay Conservation Society or Wild Sites. They're big area-based conservation groups. We work with them. They may not be direct members of BC Nature, but they're affiliated with us. So again, we look to see who we can engage with. For example, in Penticton, we're working with the Friends of Oxbow River wetlands. We work with them to help promote this project and help promote protection of biodiversity.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks. I would just be curious to know who the Summerland group partner would be.
We would have to. My apologies.
We can find out and let
There's
you
the
know.
South Oakland Conservation Society. It's through the regional district. We contribute to it, a conservation fund, which is pooled by the regional district, and then the South Okanagan Conservation Society administers that fund and all kinds of groups. There's South Okanagan Land Trust. They're more regional here than specific to Summerland. So just a question to our staff maybe. So if we're interested in participating in this, would you need a motion to that effect? Just asking staff to work with BC Nature to identify appropriate sites?
Through the mayor, yeah. So we do have a draft motion that would be that staff be directed to work with BC Nature to assess and register eligible district of Summerland parks in the Municipal Protected Areas Project as part of the Canadian Protected and Conserved Areas database.
Would anybody like to bring that forward? Councillor Betts, second. Councillor Peak. Okay, any discussion on that motion? Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Will it come back to council before it goes to? I'd like to see what we're putting on it and what we're not putting on it. Please, thank you.
Okay, does that have to be included? Or?
We can do that.
It probably should through an amendment.
So friendly amendment. Seconder on the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment that it comes back to us? Okay, I'll call a question on the amendment. All in favor? And any discussion on the motion as amended? Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's just important to kind of, like I was saying, just take the opportunity to contribute in terms of if we have municipalities participate across Canada to actually look at how much land already is protected. I think as a country that just might already be a really strong starting point for our 30-30 commitments. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I agree. This, we'll do our part to get this 30 by 30 done. So I'll just call the question. All in favor? And none opposed, that carries. So thank you, Molly and Andrew. Could I ask you a question? Just, you might not know, but the provincial approach, the provincial government's also committed to this 30 by 30. Do you know how they plan to go about it? What are they looking at? How they plan to reach their goal?
Yeah, they're looking at maybe a bigger scale. They're looking at a lot of lands that maybe have other purposes. There may be crown land that may have purposes, for example, that may be used for water preservation, watersheds, and so forth. They're looking to register those, but they're working on a process to include First Nations in the registration, and that's what their focus is on right now. They've already registered all the provincial parks and provincial lands that are suitable. And now they're looking at other lands and most other lands have First Nations processes involved that they have to engage with.
Okay, we had a presentation at the regional district, our last meeting there from Parks Canada, and they told, the federal government intends to meet its commitment through establishing new national parks and new marine parks and that sort of thing. But then, so what did the provincial government, do they intend to establish new provincial parks? How do they, because if they're only at 20% now, how are they going to get this extra 10%?
We don't have that information. I couldn't answer that question. I just know that they're looking at all lands that could possibly be registered. They are looking at that, but I don't know how they're going to do it.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, I'll let you go then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was very informative.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Bye. It's now the public comment opportunity. Don't see any members of the public. So we'll move on to our business items, 9.1 capital projects update, and CAO, please.
Yeah, I'll introduce this and you'll notice we don't have Jeremy right now. The wind has blown down some lines and we're going to have to do an emergency power shutdown. So the gang is working on that right now, but between Jake and I, hopefully we can present the clarifier update. Anyways, just to introduce the item, generally speaking, we do try to come to council every single council meeting. So council and the public has an update on where we are at with construction. Obviously trying to keep everything on track with on time and on budget, and trying to avoid any surprises. That being said, we don't know what we don't know, and so we can't make absolute promises, but yes, everything's looking like it's going very well. And so maybe with that, we'll start out with your updates, Jake, and you can maybe present the clarifier piece as well, to the extent you can.
Sounds good, Graham. Thanks a lot for having me. I'll start off with the Warden Street project as usual, and apologize if some of this is repetitive from last time we did this, but the process to date and the key milestones has been all the underground electrical and communication works along Warden Street from Kelly to Victoria has been installed. The storm, the water and sanitary improvements along Warden Street from Kelly to Victoria are complete. The structural soils and soil cells to support existing and new trees along Warden are complete. The pathway and road on Warden and Kelly are getting prepared for paving. One other thing we've added is that little piece next to the cenotaph. We're getting that completed as well. The curbs along Warden have been placed. The cenotaph has been dismantled and rebuilt in the new location. The water main in the alley parallel to Victoria has been completed. The sidewalk pavers are completed for the most part on Warden. And the alleyway electrical is proceeding in Main Street in Victoria. Intersection curbs are installed and the pavers are getting installed as well. So currently we've completed 55% of the project based on the budget. And the budget spent to date is approximately $2.865 million. So the key bundles of work underway right now are the Warden Street surface works from Kelly to Victoria. One crew is going to be going to Henry Ave and intensifying the work on that laneway starting tomorrow. Victoria Road and Main Street, the intersection pavers are almost complete. They estimate they'll be finishing by the end of this week. And project paving is planned for October 6th and 7th, so next Monday and Tuesday. The electrical works in the laneway behind Victoria Road and east along Warden are expected to be completed mid next week. And as Graham said earlier, there's the outage on Thursday night to connect to one of the underground vaults. And Henry Ave is also getting prepared for the washroom install. So for target completion dates, we're still looking to have the Warden Street area and Victoria complete for November 11th. And we're looking to open the intersection of Main Street and Victoria around October 8th. Just want to see how the asphalt is, as far as we don't want a bunch of oil dragged onto the new pavers. So if it gets cool at night, we should be good to open it on the 8th, but we want to test it out before we commit to that date because we don't want a bunch of oil dragged across the new beautiful pavers in the intersection. The work is currently a few weeks behind schedule due to some of the electrical and communication line conflicts, but the contractor and the district are working on strategies to ensure the project is complete prior to November 11th. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions for Warden Street.
Okay, thank you. Questions on Warden? Councillor Peak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you tell me what you're talking about, dragging the oil on the new pavers? I don't understand that.
Sure, through the mayor. Sometimes right after you pave a road, you still have all the oils on the surface of it, and you can drag that with the tires as you people drive over it. So what we don't want to see is a bunch of brown and black streaks going over the new intersection on the pavers. So we just want to make sure that it's usually a bigger problem in the summer when you have the hot nights and it doesn't cool down as much. So you can cool down the paving a bit as well by putting some water on it. So we just want to really make sure that we're getting a good product at the end of the day.
Okay. Just for clarification, you're going to be working on the Henry Plaza area in the near future as well?
Again, through the mayor, yes, that's correct. We'll spoke to the site superintendent today, and he's either going to have a crew there this afternoon, kind of going more intensely on that area, or tomorrow. So starting on that.
And is there any difficulty? I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's okay. Do we have, I don't know what the answer is in terms of the four-season washroom we're getting. Is it a one unit that just comes and gets put in, or do you know that?
Yeah, it's a prefabricated unit and it gets brought in and then dropped onto a concrete pad with a crane. So what they'll be doing right now is doing the road work as far as they can up to where the washroom's going and extending the services to the new location, getting that site prepped for when they can drop it off.
Excellent. And if I may, one more question. I was asked, are we moving the flagpole?
Yes, we have two flag poles by the cenotaph. I believe that's getting moved. I'm not sure if anything's getting done with that current one. It might be getting taken down, but we should, yeah, I can look into that for you.
Okay. Thanks very kindly. Appreciate the update.
Councillor Turner.
Main Street or the intersection at Main and Victoria is looking really good. I feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel. Do you guys provide regular updates in terms of timing and what you just told us to the businesses in that area?
It's a good question. We try and, through the mayor, keep it as much up to date on the website and through Facebook, but there are definitely some impacted businesses right there, such as the Beanery. We worked with that property owner to have some of the their signs put up on the construction fencing, but it's probably a good idea just to pop down and say, hey, just so you know, we're going to be paving here early next week, and give them a heads up on what to expect.
Yeah, I think that they would really appreciate that. And it's starting to look really good. But I think as long as we can give them updates, getting so closer to the end, I think they'd really appreciate that.
Sounds good. Yeah, we are really lucky. Kevin, one of the flaggers, is very personable and he tries to keep them all up to date, but it's a lot to put on one person. So. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barkwell.
When will you be working more to the east of Warden Street, past the Shell station and going underneath Rosedale Avenue? That's going to be a bit of a tie up to, I didn't see that on the list.
Through the mayor, that's another good question. I believe they're looking at starting that in approximately a week and a half to 2 weeks, getting going that way. Right now, we're reviewing the traffic management plan to see how that's all going to work and kind of tweaking that to try and minimize impacts as much as we can right now. But once we approve that, there'll be a permit to work in the right of way, and we'll have the schedule attached to those specific spots.
So it sounds like you don't have an answer yet for my next question, which was like, will it still be like one lane with flaggers or something, or is it gonna have to close entirely and for how long?
Yep.
'Cause that's most of all it's busy. Yeah.
For sure. Through the mayor, that's one we're still working on. There's a potential to close one lane, get that completed, backfilled, open that one, and then kind of stagger it. So that's one thing we're looking at. We're also looking at potentially doing one-way traffic through past the art center and the museum that way, with the exception when they have to do a crossing to try and keep some traffic going on Wharton Street, just depending on what they need. So we're kind of going through it this week and early next week, and then we should have that dialed in.
Okay, Councilor Betts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is very much in line with what we are just talking about. So I'm just thinking forward. We've had some correspondence from the Arts Center, so I'm just trying to think forward a little bit, and they are quite concerned about potential road closures during light up, and because that's a big time of year to draw guests into the Arts Center who come and buy like Christmas presents and stuff. So, of course, Light Up is Friday, November 28th, I believe is the date. So would there still be closures happening like in front of the Art Center at that time? Approximately?
Through the mayor, I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't have that schedule dialed in yet, but that's something I could find out for you. At least a rough schedule to give an idea if it's close to that.
Right. Yeah. I think just having a lens towards Light Up being just a major community operation, right? Where not only are we having tons of people coming who are going to be driving, parking, wandering around, that all of our local businesses are going to need access at that time. So I know we've been really focused on November 11th up until now. So I'm just throwing that Friday, November 28th is just a huge event again as well, and a really big economic driver. Thanks.
Yeah, no, good point. We should work with the chamber on that as well so they can work around whatever inconvenience there might be. Councillor Peak?
Thank you, Jake. I'm going to talk about the same thing. The Arts Council actually has their program. It's called Light Up the Arts, and it starts November 17th. So they actually open up for all that wonderful sales that creates a great deal of excitement and brings in 60% revenue for the artists and 30% for the Arts Council. So it's really important for them to be able to have people have access for that Christmas shopping time. They go from November 17th to December 24th. So I'm just reinforcing what Councillor Betts and the mayor have said.
Okay, so I don't see anything further on Wharton. We can move on to Prairie Valley.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Prairie Valley. We'll start with the progress up to date. So the asphalt paving is complete throughout the project. The multi-use pathway has been completed. The curbing is complete. The water main has been installed. The sanitary sewer has been installed, and 2 major slopeway upgrades are complete. So the percent complete up to date is 98% of the project based on the budget spent. The budget spent is $3,250,000, which is nearing the budget ceiling. In addition, some of the other key milestones that have been completed are the soil nails have been installed, and the line painting has been done. Work underway right now is the final project cleanup, some signage to install. They're still installing some fences and then finishing up the driveway paving. And next steps will be doing a final project cleanup and walk through with the contractor. We've already done an initial one, and we'll be doing another one. And that's about it for Prairie Valley right now.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Councillor Barkle.
The other day, I drove down about 8:30. I could see you're standing there talking to a resident. I came back about 1:30. You're still standing there talking to a resident, or maybe it was a second visit, but I was gesturing at this and that. And are they, what's the level of happiness or unhappiness? And I think somebody was trying to suggest that the road might sink because it wasn't, which was like, well, how does he know, right? It's built by engineers, but what are the issues that people are talking about along there?
Through the mayor, yeah, I know where I was in both those instances that you're talking about. I think this is a multi-year project, so it started last year, it's finishing this year. It's been in front of a lot of people's houses. The longer things roll on, the more people can, they're tired, they're done. They're ready for this to be moved on. And I think for the most part, we get I get emails like with concerns, like when there's dust during constructions, but then I also get the ones where this is awesome, I can bike into town now. So it's hard to tell somebody nobody likes living through construction, and it's short-term pain, long-term gain, all those things when they're the ones listening to the rock hammer outside their front door. And I get that. But as far as the road sinking, I don't see any concern for that. We have had engineers and geotechs involved, and we've done materials testing. So I don't see there being a concern for that.
Okay, anyone else? No? Okay. Well, it's nice we're coming to the end of that. Coming to the end of that road, yeah. Next, primary clarifier. Who's taking that?
Sure, I don't mind going through that as well. Progress of today on the primary clarifier is that the excavation for the clarifier, the blending box and splitter box is in, the concrete base and splitter tie-in box, and the clarifier pump gallery splitter box, blending box, concrete slab pours have been done. Percent complete as of today is 33% based on the start of the April 25th, 2025, with the estimated completion of August 23rd, 2026. Budget spent to date is 13% or 724,000. And the budget forecast, variance forecasting a budget spend of 100%. The overall scope is currently below the approved budget, but some optionally scoped items will be completed as budget allows. The key bundles of work underway are the clarifier walls being formed and poured, rebar work, inspections and testing. Key next steps, after the clarifier walls are complete, the splitter and blending boxes will be formed and formed. And the target completion date again is August 23rd, 2026. The project is currently on scope and on schedule and on budget. The general contractor and the subcontractors continue to make good progress with the intention of completing all the underground works prior to the onset of negative temperatures.
Councillor Betts.
Thank you for that. Can I ask one more question about Prairie Valley? Is it reopened? We were away last week. Is it back open to the public fully?
Through the mayor, yes, it is open fully to the public. I think we'll be putting another Facebook post, just kind of putting that out there.
Yeah.
We're going to talk to you guys depending on what you wanted to do to celebrate the end of this project. We were just kind of completing the last little part.
We might get run over on the road.
You can get a truck to go through the ribbon or something. Yeah.
Okay, I actually didn't know, so
Okay.
thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I think a Facebook post might be worthwhile.
Yep.
Okay, any questions on the primary clarifier? Councillor Barkwell.
The primary clarifier, like right now, it's all construction, concrete work and stuff like that. Does it have long lead items like pumps and pipes and stuff that are any kind of a concern, or specialized equipment from the US, or is it just a pretty simple structure altogether, just expensive to build?
To the mayor, right now, it looks like they're doing this simple structure, the forming and everything, but I can check into some, like, I would imagine there'd be some valves and stuff that are pretty unique to something like this, and I can find out from Jeremy where they're at as far as purchased lead time and things like that, make sure.
It's not really your project, is it?
No. Mr. Mayor, Jeremy's on now, if we have a question for him.
Okay, Mr. Storville's there.
Jeremy, I assume you can hear us.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just asking about the equipment for this clarifier. Are there, specialized pumps or valves or things like that that are kind of a long lead time and maybe come from the US and might surprise us, or is that all firmed up really, really airtight?
Thank you, Councillor, through the mayor. Sorry for my late arrival there, just dealing with some operational things right now, but good question, Councillor. The main component of concern is it's not a concern, just get that out front, is the mechanism that turns inside the clarifier, and that item is already on site. We had some small shipping damage to it that was minor, resulting in a change order in our favor to have that repaired, but the district's made whole with that, no issues there. So it is on site, and that was sort of the big item. And the rest of it with the pumps and motors and that, I understand those are all already sourced and dealt with, and they come in later in the project anyway. So at this point in time, the contractor hasn't brought forward any concerns at all. The big risk item was the mechanism. That's a $500,000 item, and we made the early decision to purchase that well ahead of the project so that it would arrive on time. So we're looking quite good in that respect.
Okay, good to get that clarified. Sorry. I could help it. Nothing else? CAO, please.
And since it doesn't look like there's any more questions, Your Worship, I just wanted to recognize the hard work of particularly Jeremy and Joe, our directors, but also our manager of engineering, who is on site and probably the busiest guy in show business right now with Prairie Valley Road and Wharton Street. And with all these projects going well, just these things don't happen by accident. They happen by good planning and efforts all the way through. And so I appreciate the work that they're doing.
Okay, thank you. So just got a resolution to receive for information. Councillor Nelson, Councillor Betts, all in favor? That carries. Thank you, Jake. Moving on to, what's next here? Permissive tax exemptions. Director of Finance. What's next? We could do the RCMP first if you want. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Corporate officer, that's okay, just to switch things around like that? Yeah, okay. So, well, I want to do things by the book. So, if yours and beer after all. Sergeant Victoria, please come up. Welcome to Summerland. Hope you're settling in. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, this is fancy equipment we're not used to. Yeah, so thank you for having me. And I've been in the community for about a little over a month now. So it's been a bit of a change in the community and just kind of getting my feet wet here, meeting everyone. I've had a couple meetings with CAO and his staff and his senior management team, and just kind of getting to meet everyone and seeing what the issues are and how we can kind of work towards resolving them. So I appreciate you guys having me and taking the time to meet.
Mayor, would it be okay if the sergeant were to give just a few words of his background experience?
Oh, yeah.
as well?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Sure. So, I grew up on northern part of Vancouver Island. I joined the RCMP in 2001. I was originally posted to Surrey. I grew up in a tiny little small town and got posted to the biggest detachment in Canada. I spent about 4 years there and moved to Bella Coola on the Central Coast and spent 2 years in Bella Coola, to Comox for about 10 years. I was a member of the emergency response team. Calling Canada, if you watch it on TV, they call it the SWAT team. So I was a sniper on the SWAT team for a few years, and then I moved up towards Prince George. I lived in Wells and Barkerville for a couple of years. And then a quick stint in Caslow out in the Kootenays. And before here, I was the operations NCO in the Clearwater Detachment. So I have about 24 years of all operational experience, and most of it is in general duty and emergency response team and that sort of thing. So, and now I'm here.
Finally.
It took a long time to get here. My apologies. The housing market hasn't been great in the last couple of years, but we're excited to be in Summerland. Living and being part of the community is super important for me. We took our time and actually purchased in Summerland. So hopefully I'll get to meet some of you and you'll see me out in the community and at the arena and all those types of things. So we're excited to be here. The family's excited to be here too. So.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And then for the quarterly stats, any comments on?
Yeah, I don't know if the council's had a chance to look at the quarterly stats. A lot of this, and I'll preface it, Graham said that it looks like the break and enters are up substantially since I got here. I assure you that wasn't my fault. Yeah, I had to look through the stats, and I've talked to everyone in my office. It's difficult because I think they're somewhat misleading. The numbers are so minimal. You know, 1 or 2 different occurrences changes these stats by huge percentages. The one obviously that jumps out is the break and enters. So when I actually dive into the stats, all of those were at the landfill, and I'm not sure exactly what it is, the excitement at the landfill that people want to steal, but it's this thing. So it sounds like that's kind of settled down, but. Yeah, I think the stats kind of speak for themselves. They're all very consistent year over year, and they're slightly decreasing, which is a positive in my eyes. So,
Okay, thank you. Councillor Peak.
Thank you very much. Not towards the stats, but I'm wondering, are we at full complement, or do we have some officers out on leave or seconded elsewhere?
I wish. So currently the biggest difficulty we have right now is the full complement. So our stats were supposed to have 9, and in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be down to possibly 4. So it's a difficult time. We're working. I've had 3 hours sleep in the last 24 hours, so it's not sustainable. We're working on some, progress to try to mitigate that. I have 2 on long-term sick leave, 1 on maternity leave, and 1 is transferred out. So we have identified an officer to come in, but much like myself, he has a house to sell first. So it's a bit of it might be a little while before he gets here.
Yeah, Steph. Councillor Betts.
Thank you for the opportunity. You think with how nice it is here that it would be easier to get different staff to get here, but maybe we're just too chill of a community, a little down low. But yeah, I appreciate that you just kind of highlighted that the business break and enters are at the landfill. We on council know about that. We've been trying to make different decisions and mitigate that in lots of different kinds of ways, so that keeps coming up and we keep making different kind of investments on the back end. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, there was kind of a strange happening down at the library, outside the library, about a week, maybe 2 weeks ago now. And I was wondering, there was basically just a random person at the end of the school day outside of the library with a weapon and a blowtorch just hanging out on the sidewalk. And there was 2 RCMP officers and SWAT cars there just try and deal with the situation, which was great. Just kind of surprising in our community. Are we still having residents who aren't typical Summerlanders in our community, kind of unhoused people and just maybe kind of mentally unwell? Are we seeing that a lot here that you have seen?
Yeah, I think that's obviously a concern in the last couple of years. That's obviously skyrocketed. We're seeing a lot more unhoused people. There's a lot more people with drug addictions and mental health and all that sort of thing. We definitely have that issue, and the proximity we are to the bigger centers like Penticton and Kelowna, we are occasionally going to see that, and they're going to be transient people coming through. Obviously, we try to mitigate that within the community. We don't have to my knowledge, like homeless shelters and things that are attracting them. So they tend not to stay, which is a benefit in our community. But we do get the spill off from the larger centers. There's no way around that at present. They're going to come here. And I think a lot of the crime, when I look at the stats, are criminals that are coming from those larger centers. They're stealing cars in Penticton. They're coming here. They're breaking into things and leaving. So just in the proximity of those bigger centers, we will see a bit of that spin-off crime for sure. There's no doubt about it.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome to the community. Glad to see you here. Prior to COVID, we had a pretty vibrant citizens on patrol. Is that something you've ever worked with in other communities?
I have in fact worked with it, and I met with Councillor Barkwell about 2 weeks ago to discuss that, and he was sort of spearheading that to bring it back to the community.
Well,
So
it'd be a great retirement job for you, Mr. Barkwell, Councillor Barkwell.
the pay isn't very good though.
No.
Okay, anyone else? Councillor Barkle.
Yeah, I was going to make you the first person I invited to join for another thing. I was wondering about, it's a chronic problem with staffing levels here in Summerland. I don't know if Kelowna ever gets down to 50%, but it's, proportionally, it's a big thing for us to be down 50%. I wonder what the funds that we pay a certain amount for policing. And I think we pay based on a staffing of 9. What happens to we don't pay, we have a certain amount. And so what happens to the dollars when A, there isn't somebody here that we need to pay, and B, if they're on long-term disability, does it still come out of our funds? I guess it's more of a Dave question, but it's everybody answer.
Yeah, I don't know if I can, we probably both speak to it. Essentially, you're on the hook until they're off for 30 days, and then that goes back, and then that position goes to the province, and the province pays it. So the district isn't on the hook after 30 days. So the city is saving money in that regard, but in the same token, the overtime budget is extended as well. So it's a bit of a wash on both sides, and you might be able to speak to that better, but.
No, that's. The only thing I'd add is we budget for a full 9 complement, right? That's what we anticipate. That's what we expect. So we budget on a 9. So then, our actuals over the last years, when we sit down and go through budgets, you'll notice that our actuals, of course, are lower than what our budgets are, just due to some of these reasons.
Yeah, I don't have the budgets in front of me, but it's a pretty substantial savings last year. I think several $100,000 to $1,000 under budget.
Yeah, so I can't remember, does that go into a special police reserve or just back into general reserves? General, okay, because there are certain things, like if we have a major murder investigation or something, that could be a big expense on the community. That doesn't we have extra, specialists in town and things working on it, or does the province pick it up?
I think it depends on where it is, and I'd have to clarify that, but the resource would come out of Penticton, and some of those costs would come back, but also depending on the unit, what it is, it would also, some of that would be borne by the province as well in that 70-30 split.
Councillor Peak.
I make a note of the fact that I believe we've got cameras for all our contingent. Can you speak to how they're performing, whether they work well or?
I can. They do work well. The theory is great, but with the cameras is also the inherent extra cost of it and the actual managing that data. So now those cameras are recording all the time, and we have to manage that data. We have to store the data, and it's also creating a huge backlog in the court system, because now every time our guys or anyone on our team goes to something, now we have to vet that video. So we have to vet all the license plates out that are, the cars driving by. We have to vet out all the people. So it's a huge undertaking for the province to do that. And so a file that would 2 years ago take us a week to do is going to take us 6 weeks now, just because of all the extra data that's required to be vetted and transcribed and all those sorts of things. So they're great to have, but there's also an inherent large extra cost to have them. So it's, yeah.
That's the reason I asked, because I went to a session at UBCM that were talking, prosecutors were saying on many of the counts, they would have to review 3 hours of video file. And thinking about it from the end that you have, are you having to do that data separation yourself? Do they have somebody that comes in and does it administratively? Or how is that handled?
Yeah, it's a complicated system. So it's essentially all the cameras are automatically uploaded every single day. So they are automatically updated. They go to the digital evidence management system. I won't bore you with the technologies of it, but there's a team in the Lower Mainland that essentially is responsible for encrypting the videos, going through them, downloading, transcribing the statements. Like a lot of it now is they're exploring a lot of AI technology to actually transcribe the video. So that helps. So it's not, someone's not actually sitting typing every single thing. So that helps, but the cost and the time is per video is substantial. Now think if you have 3 police officers going to the same thing, now Crown needs 3 of the same video. So it's a substantial cost, both in time and money, for sure.
I really appreciate your collective wisdom behind something that I thought might be a problem.
Okay, thank you. Don't see any other questions. If I could just get then a resolution to accept this for information. Councillor Peak, Councillor Patton, all in favor? That carries. Thank you, Sergeant.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Yeah. So I suggest we have BC Ambulance here. So why don't we move on to them and then we'll take a break and then go to PTs after that. Does that sound good? Everyone good? Okay.
Sorry, just before we start, I just was looking at the council procedure bylaw and we should have a formal motion to reorder the agenda. So it would just be to have the RCMP and the BC ambulance updates reordered to 9.2 and 9.3.
We'll move that. Okay, second, Councillor Peak, all in favor? That
Thank you.
carries. Okay, sir, it's all yours. Just push the button and the red light should come on. There you go.
Michael Sandler, British Columbia Ambulance Service, Clinical Operations, South Okanagan. As it relates to Disc Summerland, there are no updates for you. I'm here to answer your questions.
Okay. We'll start with Council Trainer.
Thanks for coming today.
You're welcome.
We have a delegation coming later tonight of citizens that would like our fire department to move to a first response fire department. Right now, we don't have that. And so I'm trying to learn about all of the things that would go into this. From your perspective, do you see any issues in terms of response times to calls for the ambulance?
I have the most up-to-date data for you. So just to give you some context, in the interior region, which is roughly the size of the state of Oregon in terms of landmass, runs from Williams Lake to Cranbrook to Trail to Merritt. We were averaging on August 30th to September 28th, roughly 400 calls a day in the entire district. As it relates to Summerland, your portion of that was response volumes by district. So you have 2 cars. You have a full-time car, 24/7, 365. They were responding on day shift to an average of 1 call a day. And on night shifts, an average of 2 calls a night for a total of 3 calls in a 24-hour period. Your part-time car was averaging a total of 3 calls during the day, mostly transfers in other communities, and 0.5 calls on nights. So Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of last week, they didn't do a call. Thursday, they did 2, Friday, they did 1, Saturday, they did 1. So there is, the standard across the EMS industry is a utilization rate of about 40%. So 40% of the time, the unit should be working. That's the standard. We have some units, especially in the Lower Mainland, that are in the 70% range, are very busy. Doing a quick back of the napkin math for this, you guys are around 10%, maybe 15, if you had the part-time car. So you're well within your utilization rates, and utilization rates are the primary influence on response times. So we have a 90-second response time for your full-time car, and they haven't missed that yet, at least for the most up-to-date statistics I have. I could pull an entire year for you if you wanted, but I think this is pretty indicative of what happens in Summerland in terms of total volume.
May I have, okay. So you just answered the question in terms of response times then. You said 90 seconds for the full-time car?
So be on the air and rolling from the time that they get the call.
Yeah.
So there is several steps within a 911 call that delay the overall arrival to the patient's bedside. The first is the caller themselves and the information that they provide to the call center and whether or not they are clear about where they're calling from and why they're calling, et cetera. So that can delay calls, but by the time that we get it, we've triaged it, we've sent it over to the station, they have 90 seconds to be on the air. We monitor those times quite closely. I can give you an entire year's worth of data, but in the last week, we didn't miss the 90-second response time once. So that's from the time the phone rings to the time that they're rolling out the door.
Do you want to ask that after? Okay. My final question is then, in your opinion, do you think that this is a service that Summerland needs for the community of our size, for, from your perspective? It would be an additional cost for us. So if there's a need, then, I can see it. But again, I'm just trying to learn the whole picture here. So I need your help.
Absolutely. So disclaimer, Aaron, I won't take on the responsibility of the council as it relates to how they will tax their citizens. In my personal opinion, with my patches off, you don't need it. In my professional opinion, obviously the BC Ambulance Service will work collaboratively with any of our colleagues in the fire department, and any time that you add resources that support communities and citizens as it relates to healthcare is always a good thing. There is obviously a cost to that, and the cost benefit analysis would have to be completed by the District of Summerland to decide whether or not it's the right choice for you. All I can say is that the ambulance service is meeting our target goals set out by the ministry in the mandate letters, and our staffing indicates that the total overall utilization rate has some slack in it to continue to respond to increasing call volumes and population size. You may infer from that what you will in terms of risk associated with your program development. You're welcome.
Councillor Peak.
Thank you kindly. So intimation from the people that would like to see the service expanded with our volunteer fire department is that there are ambulances that are sent out of here and then we don't have them available to answer calls.
That is technically correct, but it is misleading on its face. And so the ambulance service, as you know, is the British Columbia Ambulance Service, and therefore we respond to calls throughout the entire province. And it doesn't say the District of Summerland on the side of the ambulance. So this Summerland ambulance, designated as 334, may be responding in Penticton, might be responding in Kelowna. I've seen it take calls in Vancouver. That does not mean that you don't have resources available to respond to the citizens of Summerland. We have a matrix that allows for coverage in communities when resources have been depleted. And that's actually one of the strengths of the system. I can keep calling for resources all the way up to Atlin. So if we roll a bus in Penticton and I need 40 units, the whole province will come to me, but they will stagger as we go down, right? So I might have Prince George units doing calls down here, but I'll have Fort St. John units covering Prince George. So that is one of the benefits of having a provincially based system. We don't stop at the Summerland district or the Kelowna district or the Penticton district. Will go anywhere that the call is. So yes, technically your ambulance may be doing calls in other parts of the world, but you'll always have coverage here.
So I appreciate understanding that it's a blanket coverage. Have there been bad consequences or outcomes for Summerland residents because of the lack of an ambulance getting somewhere? And that might be a heart attack that doesn't get, or whatever.
Yeah, I suspect that there probably has been. I mean, in any system, there is always blind spots, and it can be for a variety of reasons. But as it relates to the mean and the median across other communities of this size, you're not doing any better or any worse.
I really appreciate the discussion, very much so.
Councillor Patton. Thank you, Worship. Thanks for your candor. It's quite refreshing. One of the things that
I don't run for election. It's all good.
One of the things, it's been about 2 years now, I believe, a couple years that Summerland has become the hub for Summerland in regards to having the full-time ambulance and the part-time. Has the response times changed since within the last couple years since we have become the hub? I think the term we used a couple years ago was hub. And so I'm just wondering if times have gotten better for Summerland once that change was made by BC Ambulance.
Your response times have gotten better across the board, not necessarily because we added a full-time resource here, but because we added resources in both Penticton and Kelowna. So you're not spending any time in those communities, and therefore your medics are available to respond to local area calls more readily. As an example, let's just take a quick look here. Love data. Okay, so your full-time unit has been sitting in quarters for 4 hours and 1 minute. So it hasn't done a call yet today, or it did a call this morning, obviously, but hasn't done a call since. So they are in uniform. Vehicle's got the doors open. All they got to do is roll the garage door up and wander out. There will be no negative impact to your community at the moment as it stands. If they were to do a call, somebody from Penticton would probably start wandering this way, depending on the total amount of time that they'll be out of the community, right? And so we're always rolling the dice. In any EMS system where you have what we call a CRM, which is a crew resource management process, right? We have to make an educated guess as to where the next call is going to come in. And in a perfect system where we had unlimited resources, that would never be a problem. You would just continue to add more resources to address the calls as they come up. But in a finite system where the resources are finite, you have to then make an educated guess as to where the next call is going to come. And so in terms of how we align resources to the city of Summerland, generally speaking, given your overall statistics and your numbers of on average about 3 calls in a 24-hour period, excuse the colloquialism of the term, but dollars to donuts, the next call is coming in Penticton. And so, they're not going to Penticton, they're going to stay here. And the Ministry of Health and the Ambulance Service made an operational decision almost over a year ago now, to ensure that there is always a unit available to respond to a call, a high acuity call within an 85-kilometer radius. That's roughly, the 9-minute response circle that they're looking for high acuity calls. And so what that means practically is that some of the lower acuity calls get held. And so you may, for example, hear from your citizens that they waited a long time to see an ambulance for a back pain call, up to 3 hours, maybe even 4, depending on how busy it was that day. But what you're not hearing is that they are waiting for a resource when they are acutely ill and or require urgent intervention. And as it relates to the fire department, that program and process is really there to address those urgent issues. That's not where we need slack in the system. The urgent issues aren't the issue. The chronic issues that are waiting for the low acuity for 4 hours because there's no walk-in clinic, there's no family physician, there's no nurse practitioner. Those are the issues that need to be addressed. And so that's a downstream problem and doesn't necessarily align with EMS per se, although we do have tools in our toolkit to address those solutions. But as it relates to where you might be hearing complaints, I suspect that the majority of the complaints that you're hearing are that, hey, I waited for an ambulance with my stubbed toe. I couldn't walk. I couldn't get off. And you know what? If you break your big toe, you can't walk. It's definitely a problem, right? But is that problem more important than the person having the heart attack? So we're going to respond to the individual having the heart attack, but we will come and get you off the floor, get you into the wheelchair, and get you over to the physician to get that toe x-rayed so that, we can get you on a set of crutches so that you can walk. But you're going to wait, right? And that's where we find that friction piece as it relates to the delivery of healthcare, but that's a system level issue. That's not an issue that the District of Summerland has to address.
Thank you. Great response.
Councillor Betts, then Chair.
Thank you so much for facts. I love numbers. This is kind of how I like to crunch data around the table as well. So I appreciate being able to compare Summerland against the standard utilization rate, kind of knowing where we're sitting. I actually had a really great conversation with the BC Paramedic Service at UBCM, and there were a couple people representing you guys there. And one question, and I think this might kind of tie into what you were just talking about, is the discussion around having a community paramedic. So somebody who can kind of attend more of our residents in place, especially the ones who really can't travel very well and are seeing increased request for paramedic assist to get to hospitals to be cared for when really they just need to be cared for with a higher level of care. Do we have one? Can we get one? And how do you get one? And can you just speak to that kind of system?
Yeah, so the community paramedic program is fantastic, and it has been utilized in a rural and remote setting. Summerland is not defined as either rural or remote in either the Health Canada language and or what I like to refer to as the coffee scale. I think, Doug, we talked about the coffee scale last time, right? If you live in an urban center, you get a Starbucks. And if you live in, right, you get a Tim Hortons. And then if you're rural and remote, maybe it's an A&W. So that, depending on, right? But you don't have a Starbucks, so you're not urban or metro, I guess. So yeah, you will not be under the current funding process through the Ministry of Health. You do not qualify for a community paramedic based on the current program. Having said that, I'm happy to connect with Graham and have a conversation with connecting him to the community paramedic program, and we can have a conversation about what a CP would look like. There are obviously costs associated with that, but most importantly, it has to be there has to be bang for the buck in terms of how it's going to impact the community. There's a lot of people with their hand up for a limited number of CPs that are available. And so there has to be a cost benefit analysis done, but that doesn't preclude us from having the conversation about whether or not Summerland might be a good location for the next CP.
Thank you for that. I think a conversation is always a good starting point. I hope that you and Graham can have a chat about that.
Councillor Chair.
Okay, I have two more questions for you. I really
Please.
appreciate your information. It's very helpful. Okay, so if a call comes in and it's urgent, and you have a community that has both fire responding and ambulance, who goes? Like would,
Each community is different. So I think, and I have to talk to Don Elzinga, but he's the one who manages the fire department program from the BC ambulance perspective. We have individual response agreements with hundreds of fire departments across the province, and you can pick the level of response that you would like. So as an example, Penticton only goes to our highest acuity calls, purples and reds. And even then, they don't go to some of the reds because they have 2 units and they don't want those units rolling all the time. So they'll go to motor vehicle incidents, hazardous material incidents, and some of the most serious cardiac, man down, difficulty breathing, allergic reaction, some of the things that are really, really serious, but they choose not to go to everything else. And then we have some communities where it's a volunteer and the ambulance service is just part-time. So these are the very small rural communities where they choose to go to everything. The difference between those communities is generally the overall call volume. And so in Penticton, if they chose to go to all of our calls, we could be calling them, I'll tell you exactly, we could be calling them 256 times a day. And obviously, that is not financially feasible for a 2-unit organization, right?
yeah, that makes sense. I guess what I'm getting at, and that kind of leads to my next and final question. Would you guys ever both respond? Like when
All the time.
one is needed?
We respond together all the time. And so
Needed.
Well, it depends on your perspective. So in a small number of cases, having the fire department respond and arrive first is quite helpful, especially if there is an indication for it. Narcan administration, deadly bleeding, those types of things, where time makes a difference. There are very few pre-hospital incidents where time truly makes a life and death difference, but it does happen. And so again, you roll the dice and you provide the opportunity for the fire department to be present at those calls on the assumption that that might be one of the calls where time truly makes a difference. Practically speaking, what happens in reality is that they get there and then we get there and then they give us a report and we thank them for their service and send them home. Or we get there first and we say, we don't need them. You can cancel them. And then they drive back home. And so ultimately, what that creates, depending on the level of response in the community, is big fire trucks with 8 full-time paid guys on it, driving around with their lights and sirens on. It's hard on the equipment. It's hard on the pedestrians. It's hard on ICBC rates, right? You get wake accidents that happen all the time, right? People panic, they pull right, then they pull left, and then they hit the curb, and then they hit the guy behind them. And, these things happen all the time. So there are practical costs associated with that type of response. But the outcome that we're looking for from that system is that in the small number of cases where time does make a difference, having a firefighter there before we arrive to provide that life-saving intervention is obviously part of the overall calculation on risk benefit.
Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you very much for your report. And everything you've said makes real sense. Comparisons are so difficult because of the size of the community and the resources available and the nature of the departments with volunteer versus paid staff and such. And I don't know if everybody really appreciates that they don't understand that there has been cost benefit decisions made everywhere. The speed that you go on the Coquihalla, if they lowered it to 100, it'd be safer, right? You'd have fewer calls. And that
Don't get me started.
Anything is possible. We could have a bus accident in Summerland with 25 injuries, and then we would have clearly not enough resources immediately available. Or we could have once every 5 years, a heart attack where the ambulance gets there 2 minutes too late. Anything is possible. So it's all an assessment of the cost benefit. And it sounds like the ambulance department has kind of figured out something that works. So that's quite reasonable. And then, when you consider that there's only so many dollars, and maybe the dollars aren't spent in getting that incremental 1% better ambulance time is better spent on other aspects of healthcare. So that's my speech, but my question was, right at the beginning, you offered some stats on Summerland and how many calls we get a day and for both the full-time ambulance and the on-call ambulance, I guess. Could you give them to us again?
Sure. For the week, starting on September 22nd and ending on September 28th. So 7 days, right?
A week.
The first day, your day shift car did 2 calls and your night shift car did 2 calls. The second day, your day shift car did 1 call and your night shift car did 1 call. The third day, your day shift did no calls and your night shift did 1. On the fourth day, 3 on days, 1 on nights. Fifth was 2 and 3. Sixth was 2 during the day, 3 at night. And on the Sunday, it looks like it was no calls during the day and only 1 call at night. So you're averaging about 2 calls, 1.8 calls per shift.
So the issue that everybody brings up is, well, what if the ambulance is out on a call and something, a purple event happens? Then we have the backup ambulance. I guess the on-call, the second ambulance would be available.
You do. You also have a unit available in Peachland, as well as several units available in Penticton.
Yeah. And what would the response time from Penticton be?
Depends on where the unit is. But, if they are coming from downtown, what do you always say, about 10 minutes?
10 minutes, yeah.
Roughly.
So our fire department doesn't get too many fires within, they aim for 9 minutes, but that's in a certain circle of town. So we're looking at small differences.
Yeah, probably. And then, of course, again, it's all about rolling the dice, right, Counselor? So ultimately, it really depends on where the resources are at when the call comes in. It's entirely possible that you could have a unit returning from Kelowna empty, coming right through town at the lights when the call comes in, and then they would be assigned to the call as the closest unit.
Yeah, I was thinking say a worst case scenario would have to come from some place in Penticton.
Yeah, worst case scenario, it would probably have to come from Kelowna.
Well, that's the worst thing. Yes, if every ambulance in Penticton is tied up, we got a problem, yeah.
And then remembering that we also have resources south of Penticton as well that we can utilize, including Karamias and Princeton and Oliver and Osoyoos. And so there are lots of opportunities available to us. And, we could even utilize Merit. So it just depends on the big picture, what the board looks like. And remembering that these guys and girls are a little bit like air traffic controllers, right? So they have to have a 3-dimensional view of everything that's going on. And so if Summerland happens to be a hotspot, then what happens is resources get realigned to address that.
Yeah, what I was trying to figure out was just how much faster our fire department would respond to a call or an urgent call than an ambulance when both of ours are occupied and has to come from somewhere else. Sounds likely it would be very similar time.
It would be probably, so our what we shoot for is 9 minutes. That is our goal for all what we call purple calls, which are our most serious calls. I could get you the statistics. My assumption is that you're probably at 100%. The only places in the province that we have problems with our 9-minute response time are Fraser South. And that's just specifically related to the volume and the traffic and, all the rest of it, right? So in this part of the world, I could imagine there's always one-off incidents, maybe the ambulance loses a wheel. It's happened before. Every once in a while we get into a motor vehicle accident, right? Someone doesn't slow down, someone misses the sign, someone, T-bones us in an intersection, and then, you have to start again, right? And your response time coming from a different community to start again to that call will be quite delayed. Not to mention, you also have to find an ambulance to respond to the ambulance that got into the car accident on the way to the call. So there are lots of one-offs that could happen, but generally speaking, we'll meet our 9-minute response time in this community.
Okay, thank you. Let's kind of wrap this up a bit. Councillor Peak?
Thank you. You talked about life-saving things that fire departments might do before you get there. Can you give me an idea what that might be?
So there are very few things that will kill you quickly. One of them is not being able to breathe. One of them is not having your heart work properly, so you can't. So the old, again, excuse the colloquialism, air goes in and out, blood goes round and round. Any alteration of those two is bad, right? So the things that'll generally kill you is the alteration of those two things. And so, you know, drownings, chokings, asphyxiation of any kind, you know, hazardous materials that prevent you from, you know, cellular respiration. So in this part of the world, for example, you use fertilizers and pesticides, and some of them are very, very toxic and quite dangerous and could end your life quite quickly. So, you know, what can the fire department do? Well, if there is a problem with your ability to breathe, then they can make an intervention associated with that. They could save your life. If there's a problem with your ability to pump blood around your body, they could make an intervention to save your life there. And, you know, the blood part is either bleeding out or not having the pump work properly, so blood not circulating, you know, or it could be, you know, those are really the two big ones. And so there are a few things in this world that, you know, make blood come out as opposed to stay in. Bullets tend to be the big one in the metro centers, but in this part of the world tends to be farm material like saws, chainsaws, you know, tend to lose arms, legs, those types of things. Yeah, that would make a difference in those one-off scenarios. Do they happen? Very seldomly. Right. And I mean, I could take a look at the total number and volume, but as a percentage, my understanding, and I'd have to look at the data again, this is a bit of a guess, but you know, those really serious calls make up less than 10% of our overall call volume. We're doing 1 million calls a year and maybe 100,000 of them are really serious.
Thank you. Okay, last question, Councillor Trainer.
Okay, thank you. When I had a discussion with the mayor of Merritt, because in Merritt, their fire department responds, he said that the level of first aid that they can provide is like industrial first aid. He also said they don't administer Narcan because they got sued one time when they administered it and it didn't work. So now they don't do that. And they also don't do anything like if you have a breathing issue, they won't whatever that's called, where they go directly in. So I guess my question is, you guys go to school to become like paramedics. What level training do most fire or what a department have in terms of like, would they be trained at the same level as you guys? Or are they just kind of stabilizing until you guys get there?
My understanding of the fire departments currently is that they train to what they call emergency medical responder, FR, first responder, fire responder. And yes, they have very, very limited number of interventions, but you can put a tourniquet on to stop the bleeding. You can start CPR. You can apply an AED and you can give a little bit of oxygen. Whether or not that oxygen gets in, if you have an airway obstruction, obviously is a bit of a problem. And that requires some advanced skills to solve. Again, it comes down to the district's responsibility to do a cost benefit analysis of whether or not that money is well spent on those very few number of calls where they could make a difference versus keeping them focused on their current mandate. So this is an expansion of their mandate. As I said at the very beginning of the conversation, would we welcome the support and help? Absolutely. I think you guys have to decide whether or not that expansion is something that would be beneficial, given the resources that you will have to attend and use for that expansion.
Okay, thank you. That's you.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to acknowledge Michael's presence today. He came from Kelowna to be with us, and he also is very collaborative, and I host meetings that Michael participates in that also involve the RCMP sergeant and our fire chief, and we talk about opportunities for interagency collaboration. Make sure there's usually an ambulance out there when we do our fire annual fire day at the fire hall for the public. Some of that PR value, but also what we do is we talk about certain kinds of events and themes in the community, things we're seeing. For example, we had a recent meeting and we talked with ambulance about, by the way, there's going to be on November 28th, light up. There's lots and lots of people that come to Summerland. Bad things can happen. So Michael, quickly went and looked into what kind of resourcing they had that night. So we also have some surge capacity through those collaborative conversations. And I just want to acknowledge his collaboration all the way through, knowing how very busy he is.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate that coming down. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I am available. Graham's got my number. And if any of the council members would like some detailed data, ask like that. So, I'm happy to provide that for you. Good luck with this decision.
Okay, thank you.
Take care.
Do we need a motion to receive? It wasn't really a report, but we'll do it. Okay, well, let's just do it just to be sure. Motion to receive the BC ambulance report. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Betts, all in favor? That carries. We will take a 10-minute break. So 5-2, 2:55. Okay, let's get started. Oh,
Nope.
Yeah.
we're 3 minutes over. Okay, so we're at 9.2 now. The permissive tax exemptions, and our Director of Finance, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the district's permissive tax exemption policy provides not-for-profit organizations with up to a 4-year tax exemption based on a 4-year cycle. 2025 was the final year of the most recent cycle, and applicants attended this morning's committee of the whole meeting to present their applications for the upcoming cycle. In total, council heard from 16 applicants, and staff have reviewed the applications to ensure compliance with the district's permissive tax exemption policy, as well as historical decisions of council. Based on this review, applications have been designated as a category 1, 2, or 3, as set out in the PTE policy. Now, category 1s receive 100% exemption, category 2s receive a 90% exemption, and category 3s receive a 75% exemption. The council report provides a listing of each of the applicants in the designated categories that they've been assigned. However, to summarize, applicants designated as category 1s were the Kettle Valley Railway Society, Summerland Chamber of Commerce, Summerland Youth Center Association, and the Penticton Disc Golf Club. Category 2s were the South Okanagan Sailing Association, the Summerland Golf Society, Summerland Recreation Society, also known as the Lakeshore Rackets Club, Summerland Community Center Association, and the Summerland Athletic Club, which is the badminton club, Summerland Rodeo Grounds Equine Development Committee, the Grand Lodge of BC Independent Order of Oddfellows, Freshwater Fisheries Society of BC, and the Royal Canadian Legion. All of those received category 2. 2 things to note in this category are that the Freshwater Fisheries Society of BC, they have applied for permissive tax exemption on 12 of their parcels, 10 of which are located on Gown Street. In following council's previous decision with this applicant and the decision that was made, only the 6 vacant parcels have not been provided with a PTE in my report. Secondly, the Legion, the Recreation Society, and the Golf Society's PTEs have all been adjusted to reflect the operation of a restaurant and bar with those commercial activities not receiving a permissive tax exemption. And again, following a historical practice. Category 3s, we have 2, the Summerland Sportsmen's Association and the Summerland Yacht Club. And just like in category 2, the Yacht Club's PTE has been adjusted to reflect the restaurant and the bar with those activities not receiving a PTE as well. There was an application from One Sky Community Resources Society. It is not being recommended for a PTE based on council's historical decisions with these types of applications. Additionally, over the past few years, council has received requests from not-for-profits requesting financial assistance with affordable housing construction projects, and council has committed approximately $2 million in financial assistance to those projects. However, at the time of those applications and those commitments, requests for permissive tax exemptions from those organizations were not supported. So should council approve the PTEs as noted in this report, this would equate to approximately $298,807 in exempt municipal taxes, which is approximately 2.5% of all general property taxes that the district collects. As noted previously, the recommendations in this report follow historical decisions of council. Now, council may choose to change assigned categories or vary the level of support for any applicant in any category as you see fit. So staff are seeking council direction on which properties should receive a PTE and at which level in order to bring back a permissive tax exemption bylaw prior to our legislative cutoff being October 31st. That concludes my report, and I am answer any questions that council may have.
Okay, thanks. Should we start with some questions? Yeah, Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. to our Director of Finance. Okay, the 2.45%, is that a standard percentage? I have it as 2.45 and not 2.5 in the report, just about the percent of general property taxes that the PTE allowance is given. Is that kind of similar to the historical average that we've been providing as a PTE total?
Through the mayor, great question. I actually can't answer that question without going back and doing all the calculations. What I can say is that the 15 applicants that are being proposed to receive permissive tax exemptions have historically received those permissive tax exemptions. So it's the same applicants. Assessments do fluctuate from year to year, but I would imagine, based on the fact that it's the same 15, that the percentage is probably close.
Okay, thanks for that. I think it's just kind of an important note for like Summerland taxpayers that this has been a way to support all sorts of different community amenities. I mean, obviously since the 1960s and beyond, some of the organizations going back until the early 1900s. So just kind of good context.
Yeah, the way I look at these is if these organizations didn't exist, would there be a reasonable expectation that the municipality would perform that function? And I think for a lot of them, especially the recreation ones, there would be an expectation that we would be doing it, which you know, it's more cost effective for us if a nonprofit was running these programs and providing these facilities than if we were doing it. So, you know, if you look in that perspective, it's a good deal for taxpayers. Councillor Trainer?
I guess my only question or concern would be for the Grand Lodge of BC Independent Order of Odd Fellows. That's the IOOF Hall. They're at a level 2 right now, and we did hear from the group that manages that building now. I believe they're based in Victoria. They don't really have a plan for that building. They did say that there may be, there's a for-profit that will be renting it for dance classes. But I'm just wondering what the rest of council thinks on that one. Is that something that we should still be giving a tax exemption to? I don't know. I'm just asking, and whether level 2 is the correct level.
Councillor Markle?
Yeah, I haven't had a response to that one, but aren't we going to go through each of them one by one? So are we getting ahead of ourselves to talk about that one first? But that's kind of what I think we should be doing or expected.
Sure, we can do it that way.
Yeah.
So where's the list here? Okay, I have the list in the staff report. So starting on page 4 or 5, the staff report. So we'll start with the Kettle Valley Railway Society. Oh, sorry, Councillor Valfin, do you have? Yeah, okay. But they're also on page 4. So the one starting on page 4 is all of them, right? I believe. The one you're looking at is just categories. I don't know what that is on page 3.
On page 3, there's a Summerland Yacht Club.
Yeah, but there's just 4 of them in that box on page 3. So those are the ones that are just the partial reductions. So we'll go with the one starting on page 4. The first one is Kelly Valley Railway Society. Councillor P.
I think that it is category 1, and I think it should remain that. And I think that what is recommended would work for us and for the Kettle Valley Railway Society.
Okay. Should we just go with the straw poll until we get to the end? Yeah. So everyone agree, Kettle Valley Railway Society, category 1? Yeah. Okay. SOSA.
Stop. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Come on, get on with the program.
Okay, South Okanagan Sailing Association, category level 2. Councilor Barkwell?
Yeah, I'm not really sure why it should be a level 2. I mean, it's open. Oh, sorry. Forgot my mic. I'm not really sure, but I was obviously part of the decision last time, why it should be a level 2. Because, you know, they got a lot of, it's a, you know, it's very much a recreational activity. They don't, and they certainly have a large youth component, which is always a good thing. Obviously, you know, they're not, I guess their fundraising is within the sailing community. So looking at the differences, you know, I'm willing to hear why, but I would put that proposition out there that they should be a 1, unless there's something I've forgotten about on that group.
Well, I would say, I mean, if we bump them up to 2, there'd be probably other recreation providers who would we want to bump up to 2. All the recreation guys are at kind of level 2. And I think level 1, if you look at the categories, are they part of it is it a strategic priority of council of what they're doing? Is an economic driver for the community so the whole community benefits? If you look at the factors, what page is that on? Of 1, 2, and you know what 1, 2, and 3 entail. Yeah. Then to me it fits in 2. You know, it's not open. It's not everybody's taking advantage of it. I mean, but they're very important to the community. But
If I could respond to that, I mean, we've got the Kettle Valley Railway Society as a level 1. I mean, it has a huge economic benefit, but as far as, you know, community participation, they got a small group of volunteers. So we're you know, it doesn't compare to the sort of the recreational benefit that the sailing club would have.
But I would say the railway is a bit of an anomaly because there's so much of that land is the railway itself, right? And it's so it's you know it's understanding that it's a piece of land that's probably you know you could argue shouldn't be taxed anyway, but it's also an economic driver for the community. That's the main thing, I think.
So as our policy doesn't say we give tax exemptions to economic drivers, maybe the opposite. They're you know, very well funded these days and their budget's big. And it could be argued that they need it less than say all these groups in category 2. So I'm not suggesting that they should be moved to a 2, although I'd be open to it. But maybe some of these 2 should go up to a 1.
Councilman Elfin?
I agree with what's in front of us on this one. The South Okanagan Sailing Club level 2, I would encourage us to go forward with a straw poll.
Okay, straw poll on the sailing club level 2. Well, I see 4, so I guess 5 even. So we'll keep that at a 2 for now. We can always come back to revisit them after we go through them all. The Legion at a 2. No comments, then I'll do a straw poll. Legion at 2. Seems to be 2, yeah. Chamber of Commerce at 1. Councilor Barkwell.
Yeah, there's no point in charging them taxes, but once again, you know, it seems to be that your priority is economic. You're giving your tax exemptions for some sort of economic benefit and not community benefit. And
well, as I said at the outset, the way I look at these things is if they didn't exist, would there be an expectation that we take on? And I would say tourist promotion, probably. We would be expected to take that on. if the Kelly Valley Railway Society didn't exist and there's that steam train was sitting on, who's gonna run it? Well, there'd be people saying we should. You know, there'd be pressure, so, whereas, you know, some of the recreation providers, yeah, there'd be some people saying we should take it on, but we'd be able to resist those ones a bit more, or find other people to take them on. That's the way I look at it. We all have our own ways of looking at it, but Councilor Betts?
You know, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Burkle, for bringing up the discussion. I do see where you're coming from. But it's hard to reinvent the wheel when they've been in these categories. So and I think, for example, with SOSA, if you would want to take them from 2 to 1, that would domino to a number of other sporting organizations, and then that's a budgetary challenge. So that's the limitation that I would see. I would think something would have to fall off to be able to accommodate that kind of change, which perhaps there's space to do.
Okay, so Chamber of Commerce, Category 1 straw poll. Seems to be okay. Golf Society, Category 2. Straw poll. Yeah, category golf stays at 2. Summerland Recreation Society, Lakeshore Rackets Club, Category 2. Yeah, stays. Cumberland Community Center Association, Category 2. Yeah, everyone's good. Yep, Councillor Betts.
With the Community Center Association, I'm just not sure why that's a 2 rather than a 1. Is there any, just in terms of, it's providing also mostly programming at all times for any community user rather than just one type of user. Is there any room for that one to move to a 1? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I personally don't see the reason why I don't see it. It's certainly a useful place, but there are other community centers in town that offer rental of their space, and there are alternatives. Councillor Barkle?
Summerland Community Center Association, is that the one we're talking about? Yeah, and that's Badminton Club? No, which one is that?
That's on Brown Street. The community
Brown
center.
Oh, okay, yeah, this used to be the seniors center. Now they're trying to make it more of a community center. Yeah. I'm not sure why they wouldn't be a 1. Except they don't provide any economic driver.
Straw poll on 2?
We can always come back to these, right?
Yeah, we can. Yeah. Okay, straw poll on, it says keep it as 2 now. East Summerland Yacht Club, 3. Straw poll, keep it as 3. Yeah. Summerland Youth Center Association, Category 1. Straw poll, keep it at 1. Okay. Yeah, Councillor Turner.
Can somebody remind me why that's 1 and the other community center is 2?
Well,
Because we own-
that's the previous council, but I would assume.
You're on it.
So were you?
No, I don't remember.
I would assume it's because it's youth, but you.
Okay. Oh, because it's, okay. Yeah, no, that's fine.
It targets the youth.
Targets youth. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Peak.
I think they also may be at risk with the nursery school and the Boys and Girls Club going over there. There may be some changes, so I think they may definitely need the 1 at this point.
Summerland Athletic Club, it's the badminton club. That's a 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then the Rodeo Grounds Equine Development Committee as a 2.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone's good with that. Sportsmen's Association, a 3.
Yeah.
Councillor Barkwell?
What puts them into a 3 rather than a 2 or a 1? They seem to do a heck of a lot in the community. They're open to everybody. They fundraise. They seem to, I don't know if shooting is a strategic priority, but it's recreation like all of our other, healthy community things. And
I guess, sorry. I guess the difficulty is separating out what the organization does to what the property is being used for. And and we kind of got that with the One Sky presentation, right? That they do all these great things in the community, but the property that they're asking for the permissive tax exemption for isn't really related to the property. And in which case, you think, well, they should come back and ask for a grant and aid to do some of these other things that aren't related to the property. I think we really need to focus. We're giving property tax exemption. And so we should look at what that property is being used for.
Well, and then, you're thinking about it as a service that the municipality might be expected to provide. That doesn't really work for every group. Nobody, I think, would expect us to provide a gun range, although it could be community owned and administered, but if they group folded, but I don't know. When there's a kitchen or some commercial aspect to it, I kind of think, okay, a lesser exemption, but let me put out for a straw poll. Why you gotta move them to a 2?
Yeah, we'll just get Councillor Van Alphen's comment first, then we'll take, no? Okay, Dave?
Not wanting to jump in on the straw poll, but this one, council discussed this permissive tax exemption probably about a year and a half ago. They came in midway through the cycle, and the mayor nailed one of the comments right on the head there. The exemptions they're not based on the charitable service of the organization. They're actually based on the organization's use of a particular property. That's specifically stated within council's permissive tax exemption bylaw. And I do recall that was one of the conversations that was had during the discussion of this particular application. Additionally, part of the rationale of putting them as a category 3 as opposed to any other categories is there was a discussion about the activities are somewhat open to the public and it's a semi-private membership. That was something that council also discussed. This is kind of a semi-private membership. Not everyone owns a gun. Not everyone goes up to the shooting range. So those 2 items is what I recall from your discussion last time, and that is why you landed on a 3. Not to say you can't change your minds, but that's what I recall.
Councillor Peak?
They also said they're likely to get 200 more members. That's going to be a lot more money for them to be able to cover whatever extra costs aren't done in the PTA. But again, it's the use of the land, and I think that really qualifies it for the 3.
Councillor Barkwell?
Well, not everybody owns a boat, and the sailing clubs are 2. This use of the land, I don't quite understand what uses are more valuable to us and therefore a larger property tax exemption than others. Can somebody elaborate on that for me?
I'd first like to clarify, not everybody owns a boat, which is why the yacht club is a 3. The fact that you own a boat or not is irrelevant for the sailing association, because they have all these boats and their role is to teach people how to sail, and they provide the boat. So you could go down there any summer, sign up for lessons, and they'll give you the boat. So that's the difference in terms of the comparison. So, Councillor Barton.
if you want to learn to shoot, that's, the gun club will teach you how to shoot. Matter of fact, I don't know if they have youth programs. They're certainly starting with the archery. So buying a gun for $200 is like buying your life jacket for learning to sail. It's, it's completely comparable.
Okay, Councillor Betts.
Well, I appreciate the discussion, but it actually makes me question, if the Summerland Yacht Club is a 3, why the Summerland Golf Society is a 2 instead of a 3?
Defend all these associations.
Well, no, it's just, no, because for the same reason that we're talking about, not everybody, so you can go there and learn to golf, you can go there and pay your round, but like these facilities are there. I just can see why like the yacht club and the golf society maybe belong in the same category is all I'm trying to get at.
So if I recall discussions past, the yacht club has, and to no fault of its own, because it only has a certain number of berths, has a cap on how many people can use that facility, right? They have a cap, and that's it. Once it's filled, so it's not open to anybody. Not anybody can just walk off the street and use it. Whereas if the golf club, you can. You don't have to be a member. You can go play golf there. They do have youth programs. Youth is, in the past, youth has, catering to youth has been a big emphasis of our council. So the yacht club doesn't really have any youth programs to speak of. People go learn to sail, kids go learn to sail from SOSA, but the golf club does. They do cater to youth, right? So I think there's, it's hard comparing these organizations, but I think you have to look at, community values and the value they bring to the wider community, and that's where, where do they fall in that respect? So, Councillor Alphen.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy with the Sportsmen's Association at a 3, and I think they would be 2. I mean, a part of the conversation I recall when they did bring an application in late was part of it is, having these shooting sports in one location and not all over our forest, and garbage being left, bottles being shot, refrigerators blowing up and what have you. This is all in one location. It's professional, it's safe, and they offer lessons to young people, and they have fishing and stuff for kids, and they do a lot of environmental things, helping the mule deer habitat, and on it goes. But I think I'm happy with a 3. And
Okay, so what am I doing a straw poll for? 2 or 3? 3. Okay, let's try 2. See where 3. Looks like there's 3.5 threes, four threes, or four threes, so it stays 3. And Ticton Disc Golf Club as a 1.
Yeah.
Even if it's a 3, it'd still be 0, so. It's kind of irrelevant. Freshwater Fishery Society at 2. And Dave?
Just wanted to reiterate, Mayor, that that 2 is based off of 6 of the properties not being included.
Councillor Patton? Yeah.
Thank you, Worship. So I have a question. So where the fish hatchery itself is, could we look at the PT for it? But where those 6 lots are, plus there's the additional lots where they have there's a couple holiday trailers and they've got their trucks parked. Is that worthy of a permissive tax exemption on a storage lot? Or do we just look at the permissive tax exemption on the trout hatchery itself?
Next question for us.
Okay, question for us.
Counselor Barkle.
I would say yes, it's part of the use, but I would also give them a 0. Because, what's trout hatchery to the community? It's another business, provincial business.
I was kind of inclined to move them to a 3, but it's kind of along the same lines. Counselor Betts?
In fact, the fact that they do their youth fishing programs is quite strong. I mean, like that, the allowance isn't very large. I feel like it helps fund that program. And if we remove that PTE, those programs will likely cease. So I say stay with it.
Okay, a straw poll for a 2. Yeah, looks like stay as a 2. The International Order of Odd Fellows, 100-foot hall. Counselor Barkle.
I'd like to see them get a chance to make it into a community hall like the Kinsman and well, not the Kinsman, but, what do they call themselves? It used to be Summerland Community Center Association. Yes, community hall. They obviously aren't there yet, but I think that's what they would like to see. And if in the end, after a few years, it's just a commercial space, then, well, then we got to tax them. But I'd like to give them a chance.
Counselor Renelson?
I'd like to recommend 0. It was already explained to us today that they're looking at a private person going in, starting a dance studio for profit. The Order of the Odd Fellows is disbanded. They're gone. They aged out. So now the building is sitting vacant, being managed hopefully by somebody out of the Lower Mainland, and they're trying to find people to go in. They've tried with different community groups and nothing has stuck. So I would say we go with 0.
Counselor Trainer?
Yeah, I mean, I admire what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep that like building in our community. But I feel that even if they have, a business in there, part-time, the rest of the time that building's just sitting there. And if they have a tax exemption, then maybe they're not as motivated to figure out what to do with it. I just worry that it will sit there empty a lot of the time in a prime location in our downtown. We already have a couple community halls that we're giving exemptions to. If these guys came with a full business plan or a full plan for the building, then yeah, absolutely. But I'm just caught between giving them the opportunity, but then also enabling a building to continue to sit there, not being used to its full potential. So I don't know. I'm stuck on this one.
Counselor Betts?
I'm more inclined to think like Counselor Trainer on this one. I'm not seeing an active board. I'm not seeing any members in our region. They clearly stated that they had an active membership, but that group has aged out. That organization has moved on from kind of our common community lens, and it's sad, but that is also true. And so the lack of incentive to do anything with a prime building downtown while sitting on a tax exemption when you own it, I just don't think that benefits our community in any way. And they don't have any people here to do anything about changing that. And so for me, I would rather see the Summerland Community Center Association move to a 1 and remove Grand Lodge at BC altogether.
Counselor Park?
I'm wondering if we can't do something like we did with church lands where we said, if you don't find community uses for this land, then each year the exemption is going to go down by 25%. And that spurred the development of the community gardens. if we said, okay, each year, if we don't find community uses for this building, maybe the management, maybe the Summerland Youth Center Association Society takes it over. They sign it over to them. Anything's possible, but give them a little bit of time to work on it and maybe motivate them by telling them that they're definitely going to lose the exemption if they don't get something.
Councillor Nelson?
They have been working on it. They've met with different organizations in our community and they haven't been able to come up with a deal. One of them was Rotary. So they have been working on this. Isn't something that's brand new and, oh gosh, we should hustle next week and start working on this. They have. And here we are today. And I agree with Councillor Trainer and Councillor Betts. You know, an absentee landlord, basically, and to possibly a vacant building in our downtown core is, to me, is unacceptable. We need to motivate, I think. And by motivating is stop the permissive tax grant so they'll do something with this land and building. And if it's not going to work for them, then maybe it works for somebody else in our community. But, you know, and that might be a for sale sign, sorry to say.
Councillor Trainer, then Peak.
Just checking with Dave, we don't have to do 4 years, right? Like we could do 1 year for an tax exemption?
Through the mayor, yes. You could just do 1 year. It would require a separate permissive tax exemption bylaw outside of the rest of them, but yes, you could.
Okay.
Thank you. They did have a visioning committee and they had people from Summerland that were doing that. And they actually, I think they contacted all kinds of organizations and they just didn't find a viability. I might go along with a year but I also think that they should understand that a for-profit business is not what we're looking for in a community building that we're then giving PTEs on. I don't think that man understood that. He's never been here. He's never been in that building. There just isn't a good connection there.
So I think we might be opening ourselves up to a lawsuit if we give them anything. It's a for-profit company that's running this thing. They're going to rent it out to community groups, but you don't think they're going to take a bit of a profit off that? And they're running a dance studio. That's competition to something already here that we can't be aiding any business. We just can't be aiding. We can't. The community charter doesn't allow it. So I don't see how we can give them anything. And I don't think we should feel guilty on that because basically they've had a tax holiday for 3 years. That thing has been sitting there. They haven't been renting out to any community groups. I was told when I ran for election, I had an open house in the 2022 election. That was back in October 2022. I was told I was the last one. That was when the Rebecca Lodge, just before they wound up, and they said, oh, I'm the last one that they'll be renting it to. Nobody's rented it since for community. It's never been out to the community since. So, and they haven't been able to, they've been having a tax holiday in the meantime. So they've already had their time, you know, to get their house in order. And it's too bad. It's unfortunate. But as being said, I think, if they can't do it, then let somebody else do it. But we can't be supporting a business. Anyone else? Councillor Marco?
Yeah, I was just trying to think of ways that I'd hate to lose a community building because it'll be hard to build a new one when we do need a community building. But what I'm hearing is that all avenues have been exhausted and maybe we don't need one right now, which is sad in a way. But it may or may not be the end of it if we don't give them a tax exemption. It may still remain as a community building at some point down the road.
Yeah, I think, we do have several community buildings. Like we've got the drop-in center or the Summerland Community Center. We've got the library, you can book rooms in there, which is really easy to do. And they have that multi-purpose room too. We got the Harold Simpson. We have our own, the art center. So, yeah, I don't know. giving another tax exemption to something that we don't know doesn't sit well.
Okay, so straw poll for 0. Yeah, so 0. And then the other one was the One Sky, which the recommendation is not to have one. Everybody good with that? Councillor Van Alphen?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so 0 for the One Sky. Okay. So does anybody want to go back and revisit any of those, or can we have one? Councillor Patton?
Thank you, Worship. We were talking about the Harold Simpsons being for the youth. And I think if we do, I was thinking what Councillor Barkwell was talking about the Sailing Association, SOSA, that I would say he didn't give us a percentage of what his youth were, but they deal with a lot of youth down there. And I think if we want to support organizations that are supporting our youth, that maybe SOSA is one of those organizations that we bump to a 1 from a 2 because of the amount of youth that they work with within our community. So but Councillor Barkwell's kind of turned me on that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are other organizations on this list that do a lot of work with youth too. That's the thing. So where do you draw the line? Councillor Trainer?
Dave, did the Sailing Association used to be a 1?
Through the mayor, not that I can recall,
Okay,
but I would have to go back.
that's okay. For some reason, I thought it was and we changed it, but that's fine.
I'm happy. Okay, so does someone want to bring forward a motion? It would be not as recommended in the report, as amended, I guess, eh? Yeah. Yeah.
2.
1, just the One Sky wasn't recommended, so it's, yeah. So as amended with the IOF hall. Okay, second. Okay, and any further discussion? Councillor Patton?
Thank you, Worship. And this is probably more of a question for our Director of Finance. Under the permissive tax exemption policy, under eligibility criteria, number 8, it says applicants must not be in arrears with the district in regards to any accounts for taxes, fees, or charges. But there's no timeline designated within this policy. So I guess where I'm going with this, if we have where we're giving these sums of money as permissive tax exemptions, but they haven't paid their lease payment to us by a certain date, but yet they're expecting these huge sums of money I would like to see a date in there where if they have not paid their lease payment or whatever the requirement is to the district by April 1, that the permissive tax exemption for that year be disqualified, that they will not get that permissive tax exemption. Can we put some language in our policy that will speak to timely payments where we don't have to chase for lease payments?
Through the mayor to Councillor Patton. I see where you're going. I'm just trying to think of all of the different types of payments that people would have to make. So there's lease payments with all our lessors, and that ties into whatever the lease agreement is. The big one for me would be property taxes. So property tax deadline is always July 2nd. So that's the one where, if property taxes aren't paid, that would be the instigator, I guess, in my department's realm to look at these organizations to then determine whether or not we've received those payments or not. So it is something that we look at. To put a date in the policy, yes, we definitely could do that. I'm just trying to think if there's any other things that could come into play. Like I do know that there are some organizations that have annual water rates, and those bills don't go up till August. So like to try to put a specific date on a non-payment might be challenging, but it is, to give you some peace of mind, it is something that our department looks at on an annual basis. And if we did find that there was an organization that had not paid their respective fees, that is something that would then come to council and probably an amendment to the permissive tax exemption to remove that organization off the list.
Thank you. So when we send out an invoice for a lease payment, when is that lease payment due? Because I would assume that we would put a due date on whatever lease payment that it's to be paid by.
Through the mayor, I wish that was a simple answer, but some of our leases do have different payment deadlines. Normally, they're 30 days, normally, but we probably have a couple that are outside that realm. So again, we could put something in a policy that's, you know, if these payments weren't or payments weren't received by the due date or something to that effect, if that would assist.
Thank you. So we could put in the policy that if, based on the varying dates, that if we put in a policy saying if the payment isn't made after 60 days of being due, which would be 2 months, then could we word it then in regards to that the permissive tax exemption for that current year would be lost or would not be applied?
Yeah. I was just doing some math there. If July 2nd, 60 days is July, August, September 2nd. That still gives us time to make adjustments to the permissive tax exemption bylaw. So yeah, no, we can do that.
Thank you. I guess the question around the table is, do my colleagues feel that this is something that we should look at to ensure that the monies that is coming to us in regards to leases is received before we're offering permissive tax exemptions, that some are really quite a high number. And we're, last in line to receive our payments, but they're the first in line to get theirs. So food for thought.
I mean, I think the policy already states that, so we probably don't have to change our policy. Maybe just something in place that come every year around this time of year, I guess, that we'd be made aware that that there is any PTE recipients who are in arrears to the district and make them aware, obviously, that they won't be receiving their tax exemption this year if it's not paid.
Something we can put into our process.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Did we vote? No, we didn't. Okay. So I'll call the question on the motion that was brought forward. Councillor Van Alphen, we already did all that. All in favor? That carries. Not opposed. Okay, moving on to short-term rentals. Our manager of planning, please.
Okay, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So I'm here today and I have Darren as well, our bylaw officer, to answer any questions as well about anything related to the business license bylaw or anything tied to the short-term rental. So I'll hand it over to him at a certain point for the presentation as well. So we just wanted to provide an overview for Mayor and Council following just some questions in a previous council meeting regarding a short-term rental application. And so the intent is just to go over the background, what we currently have in place in comparison to what the province is currently regulating, as some of the changes that were happening recently are tied back to what the province has also put forward for their act. So in 2021, staff were directed by council to provide an update to section 7.2 to bring forward the requirement for a permanent resident on site for a short-term rental, move towards a more unified and enforceable approach for all temporary accommodations within residential dwellings, and also provide more simplicity and clarity to staff on these forms of temporary accommodation. So that was approved in most of its current form right now that we currently see in 7.2 back in February of 2022. Then in December, the province came forward with Bill 35, which brought forward an act for short-term rentals. And this was intended to support turnover of units into long-term homes for people, provide stronger enforcement tools to local governments, as well as restrict short-term rentals to principal residences and either a secondary suite or accessory dwelling, depending on whether they qualify to be within that jurisdiction. And then also provide a new role for the province to regulate short-term rentals. So following that in December 2023, staff came back with a red line version of section 7.2 to align ourselves more with what the province currently has for their act. This was presented in May 21st, 2024, and then it was finally approved on June 24th of 2024. So in addition to those amendments, there was also a couple amendments to include some new dwellings that were part of the bill. Which one was it? Bill 44 for the missing middle housing. And so we added in our list of zones that permit short-term rentals, we added the residential medium density, which was not previously part of that. And that was just because of the types of dwellings that we added to our current list and definition to accommodate Bill 44 and the changes to that at the provincial level. So the RMD zone was a new one on top of the current zones that currently permitted short-term rentals, including A1, A2, CR1, and then the RU1 and 2 and 3 zones. So for what we did in 2024, this is a redlined comparison of what was in there before June 24th and afterwards. So as previously noted, we added in 2 additional dwelling types, being duplex housing and multi-unit housing, and this was to accommodate that increased higher density of housing to accommodate the Bill 44 regulation updates from the province. Then we also removed a section of 7.2D to say that it is not a primary residence. So we removed that, so it better aligned with the province. And then the old section F from section 7.2 was completely removed. And again, that was meant to align with what the province currently has for short-term rentals and how it speaks to primary residences. So in that case there for the last one, with that removal, it basically supports what the province states for a home that can be rented out by the primary residence. So in comparison, we're also looking at some of the definitions and how the province has defined principal residence versus ourselves. For the most part, it remains the same. Specifically, the province does look at further refining, we have noted that the province has noted certain communities that are 10,000 residents or more would then apply their principal residency requirements, being that the home where the host lives for a longer period of time in a year than any other place, or plus 1 secondary suite or accessory dwelling can be used for a short-term rental. So Summerland applies to this because we're over 10,000 people. So this applies to any of the folks who come and apply for a short-term residence application. Summerland specifically defines in our guidelines that the primary residence is a majority of the year, and we define this specifically for 6 months plus a day. The province doesn't do this, but in our guidelines, we just kind of provide a little bit more explanation around that. So, and again, looking at the principal residence and short-term rentals, the district's amendments now have the regulations read that a short-term rental can be operated within an entire dwelling, such as a single detached, or sleeping units and bedrooms of the primary residence. Regulation F, the current one that we now have, means that the short-term rental can be operated by someone who is the person who lives on the site a majority of the year. It does not mean that someone is to be on site while the short-term rental is operating, as the short-term rental cannot operate at the same time that someone is required to be on site if there's only one dwelling to be rented. So for the other areas that we're looking at here, the province has noted, again, the types of dwellings that can be used for short-term rental. They don't explicitly state the types, but they do state where a short-term rental can take place, being the home where the host lives for a longer time of the year. And the district provides a list of specific dwelling types that we permit a short-term rental. And that includes a secondary suite or a carriage house, which is also in line with what the province permits. One notable difference is that the district is a bit more restrictive than the province in stating that only one dwelling on a lot can be used for a short-term rental, whereas because we apply to the short-term rental requirements for both a dwelling where the person lives for a majority of the year and either a secondary suite or a carriage house, technically the province allows for 2 dwellings that could be rented out. Instead, we've restricted it to 1.
Just have a question here. Councillor Peak.
Thank you very kindly, Your Worship. So if I have a home that has a secondary suite plus maybe a carriage house, I cannot rent both of those at the same time?
Through the chair, that's correct.
But I could decide that both of them could be secondary units, but I'd say maybe the accessory dwelling, the carriage house might do better in the summer, and maybe I might change to the secondary suite in the winter. Would that work?
So when you apply for short-term rental, you have to go through the business license process. You're specifying the particular unit that you're renting out. So in that case, I don't believe you can do one or the other and you can swap it back and forth, but Darren can speak to that. No, nope, definitely not. Nope.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if there's no more questions. So the last item, just to quickly compare, is the length of time that a short-term rental can be taking place. So we've aligned with the province in that it can be less than 90 consecutive days that a single short-term rental unit can be operating and used. So in our previous amendments, in our previous versions of the regulations, the district previously had 28 consecutive days. So now it's aligned with the province for 90, so less than 90 consecutive days. And then for the business license requirements, I'm just going to have Darren speak to those, and then I'll just bring a conclusion.
Thank you, Odessa. So our operators must obtain a business license from the district, which is $500 annually. As part of the business license application, a floor plan, parking plan, and emergency fire safety plan must be submitted. We also have the short-term rental operators sign an acknowledgement of the good neighbor bylaw, and they have to sign a declaration of primary residency for the property on which they want to operate the short-term rental. We do have the provisions in there where the short-term rental operators are supposed to be available 24 hours a day for if anything's going on at the property with a 2-hour response time once they've been notified by the district. We did get rid of the 24/7 monitored program that would address those issues. So now our response time is next business day when we have an officer available. But I did go back and through our records for 2024 and 2025, and we do not have a single noise type complaint from a short-term rental. that was operating. And then the final thing that the short-term rental operators need to do is they get a business license from the District of Summerland, then they need to apply with the province for a registry number. Once they have that registry number, they are able to use the Summerland business license and the province's registry number to list on the major rental platforms, which is Airbnb, VRBO, and those ones. Without both of those numbers, they're not allowed, the listing sites aren't allowed to list their rentals. And I'll pass back to Odessa.
Okay, thank you. Council, any questions? Councillor Barkwell.
So a very common model in Summerland used to be that you do rent a residence of some kind, could be a cottage, could be a house, for about maybe 9 or 10 months, and then do short-term rental in the summer. And so in most cases, it wasn't somebody's primary residence that was doing that. So is that model excluded now? It's not your primary residence?
Yes, it would be excluded. It has to be their primary residence. So there are definitely people who that affected, but also with our old short-term rental policy before that came in place, that wouldn't have been permitted either, because you had to have the secondary residence on the property.
I'm going back further, I guess.
Yes.
But they can rent it out for more than 90 days and it's not a short-term rental. Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you. On your slide here, floor plan, parking plan, emergency fire safety plan are submitted as part of the application. Are we doing inspections? Like, is our building inspection team going to make sure egresses and stuff are appropriate, like health and life and safety issues?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Van Alphen, yes. Our building officials go through and do a health and safety inspection. They check to make sure the windows are the right size for egress, that they aren't screwed shut. We did run into that in one instance. So they do a thorough check. They make sure the fire extinguishers are there mounted, that the fire escape plan is on the back of the doors, and do a full health and safety inspection.
Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So thanks for the presentation. I think it was nice to have an update, even though I'm sure everybody's tired of STR. But I think because the District of Summerland did so much work and then the province came in with new legislation that we were trying to drive and make sure everything aligned. So in going through this again, the biggest glaring difference to me is that ultimately the province allows 2 rentals per property and we only allow 1, as long as it's the principal residence or the primary residence. So if a resident lives 6 months of the year plus a day in the rest of the province under these regulations, they could then rent out their secondary dwelling and their primary. If you spend half the year in Mexico, you could rent both dwellings on your property. So that was the difference that I noticed, that we don't align. And so I'm just wondering have we heard any feedback from any applicants about that?
Your worship to Councillor Betts. No, I haven't heard anything about that specifically when they've had 2 sites on, or 2 residences on a property. When council passed the previous short-term rental, it was to try to encourage additional units to be built within the district by having the secondary residence there that will hopefully be rented out long-term. And I think that was part of why when we had the discussions, we thought of limiting it to just the 1 to encourage more rental units within Summerland.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I really understand that. It's just, this is kind of this gap that I discovered, because ultimately you could have a carriage home that you rent out to a permanent long-term resident. You personally live in your home for 6.5 months a year and leave for 6 months, and you actually could generate income on that house in the time that you're gone. So that was the difference that I saw lacking with the District of Summerland's current policy, the way it stands, in comparison to the province. Now, I know we're allowed to be more restrictive than what the province initially sets out. So it's not that we're out of line with what the legislation is. I just noticed that, you know, for people who do spend half the year away, if we'd heard anything. Now, by the time they get to you, they might have already gone through the full package, as I discovered, and you would know if you're in alignment with that or not, just from the get-go. I think at the end of the day, there's been a lot of changes over a number of years, and I would actually be really curious to try and kind of communicate with our STR permit holders about the program, about how we're doing, about how the District of Summerland is doing, about if there's any opportunities for improvement or change. Because we're a year out from our last bylaw change, so I don't want to just suggest another bylaw change at this time. But I do think that maybe some open communication with our ultimately business license holders in this part of our community could be a valuable exercise.
There. Just for clarity, if somebody has a carriage house on their property that they rent out long-term, they could rent out their principal residence for when they're away. But what the province would allow would be for that person to operate both of them as a short-term rental, both units as a short-term rental. And the way ours was created was to allow only one of them to be used as a short-term rental.
Yeah. Just for clarity's sake, thank you for that. In the event that, say, the carriage home was could they both be, who would be administering the primary residence if it was being used as a short-term rental and the carriage home is being used as a long-term rental? Are we now allowed to use property management companies in that situation for that short-term rental? Or does it have to be the renter of the carriage home, for example, the long-term renter on the property?
Your Worship, Councilor Betts. So the operator of the short-term rental must be the person running the short-term rental, but they can hire a property manager to do some work on their behalf. So it's in the gray. What can't happen now is what we had before, where short-term rental management companies would have 20 or 30 listings that they managed. And then they would be the ones booking, meeting the guests on site, all of those things. And they acted as a manager for like an absentee owner. They're able to work on behalf of a present owner, more as an employee than as the one actually running the short-term rental.
Councilor Park? It's a subtle difference.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's, that's the way it is. I think the confusion for us has been, or at least me, was our original goal was to have somebody on the property. So it was only places where there's both a carriage house and a main house that could be used for short-term rental, or else within the residence. But so now you don't have to be on the property. I'm clear on that. Yeah. And that's when what the sort of thing that came up for that strata, and when the issue came up about, do you have to be on the property, which we don't have to be, and is it possible that we would put that rule, and would we want to put that rule in? I don't think it's possible, is it, with the province?
Your Worship, to Councilor Park, well, we can be stricter than the province. Kelowna is a fantastic example. They said no more short-term rentals when this came in. They grandfathered everybody who was in place and then stopped and said nobody else. They're revisiting it right now. It's my understanding. So we can be stricter. So again, you know, where the province says 2 units on a property can be rented, we've limited it to 1. So we could go back to that same format. I believe we would have to, that'd be something for corporate, but I believe that would be a grandfathering situation for who exists already. But going forward, if we wanted to go that way, we could.
In my view is, it seems to be working. You know, it's, by requiring, with our primary residence definition, you know, you can't have two short-term rentals and no owner there. You know, and I think the evidence is just what we heard, that we haven't really had any complaints about, you know, noise and whatnot. So I think why try to fix what's not, doesn't seem to be broken. It seems to be working as we had envisioned it, and so that's great. Anyone else? Then I think we might need a resolution to accept for information. Is that what we need to do? Okay, Councillor Beek, second Councillor Patton. Any further discussion? Councillor Betts?
And I thank you for the opportunity to kind of just talk about it and think about it again. It's a complicated topic. So it is really detailed. I appreciate that. And, you know, I hope that others do support the idea of actually trying to communicate with our business community to make sure that just a lack of complaint doesn't mean that we have landed at the best place. So just as feedback. Thanks. Because these people have now done significant investments. It costs a lot to run a short-term rental. So some people might look for the opportunity to advance that.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, guys. Now just need a bylaw or a motion, a resolution to close the meeting to the public pursuant to sections 91C, G, and I of the community charter. Oh, did we vote on the last one to receive?
No,
Oh, that's right. Okay, so all in favor of receiving? And none opposed, that carries. And a resolution to go into close? Councillor Nelson, Councillor Betts, all in